Welcome. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyanini. And this morning, we bring you everything you need to know about the Agyapa Mineral Royalties Deal. The government intends to get money today and use future mineral royalties to pay. There's been a lot of talk about it. Great deal of misinformation, confusion, misunderstanding. We will break all of it down this morning here on Newsfile. You leave this show with a full understanding of what the deal is and is not. So stay with us. It's a single topic show. The Agyapa Royalties Deal. Good or bad? Is Ghana being shortchanged? We'll give you all of that in just a short while. And in 1 minute, I'd like to ask, in respect of the RTI, whether or not the government, the president, want to take credit for it. After 2 decades of crusade and pressure to have the RTI passed, it was eventually passed. The only law that was passed and its implementation suspended for 1 year so that we will prepare. The year came upon us in January of this year, and we're not ready. The offices that are supposed to be set up, the body that is supposed to be set up to help the implementation of the act is still not set up. We get a lot of excuses. Now, guess what? People are still having to go to court when the purpose of the law was to avoid people having to go to court and spend. The Electoral Commission earlier very shamefully denied a member of parliament, a representative of the people, procurement information, public information. The person had to go to court, and the court compelled the Electoral Commission to give the information. We know many have made applications that are being denied. The Media Foundation for West Africa has just disclosed to us this week. It made an application to the NCA asking for the list of radio stations that are shut down, among others. Guess what? They are being told to pay 2,000 Ghana cedis to access that basic public information. The NCA claims that it will do some research to get the information, and this cost is even considerate. It is bad to say that the courts have even ordered as much as 1,000 and 1,005 in the circumstances. But what we need to know is that the law actually says it is not every information that one must pay for the reproduction. Information that is in the public interest, among others, is supposed to be given free of charge. Mr. President, Information Ministry, government, collective, if you want to take credit for the RTI, you need to begin to speak and tell agencies, departments, and ministries that are acting in such bad faith in respect of honoring the basic right of the citizens. Speak to them. Your silence is deafening, and it doesn't help. They are misconducting themselves by denying people information, and the institution you are supposed to set up to deal with those issues is still not set up. Please speak publicly and discourage this behavior. Some have applied for information, and they have been told all sorts of stories. This is my take. I'm asking, Mr. President, government, do you want to take credit for the RTI, which is the most important corruption legislation? Thank you. That's by way of my take. Now, we are going to host the best of experts that you can have to discuss the matter of the Agyapa Royalties Deal. Bright Simmons will join us. Bright Simmons of MPed degree and honorary executive of Imani Africa. Charles Boahen who is the Deputy Finance Minister, who is a man on this job, will also be with us. We will have Kweku Baako, Editor-in-Chief of the New Crusading Guide. His documents are already here in the studio. And of course, there are a couple others that are joining us on the discussion, including Steve Manteal. You know that they led CSOs, 12 of them, a dozen of them, raising several concerns, suggesting that this was an elite capture and that this was opaque and so intended to do something that is wrong. Something that they say actually under the Petroleum Revenue Management Administration in this country could never have been done. Did they get it wrong? Are they right? There are those who are talking about beneficiary interests, that the beneficiaries ought to be disclosed. Who are the beneficiaries? Are there any beneficiaries yet? We will bring you everything that they ought to be known. The Attorney General of the Republic also gave a number of advice. Once, twice, and a third time. And even at the third time, she was complaining about 7 different issues she had raised were still outstanding. That is, as recent as the 12th of August, were still outstanding. And she insisted, until those are dealt with, the deal was bad for Ghana. Now let's listen to a couple of things that have happened on this issue, and then our guest will come in, we'll start the discussion.
We take this opportunity to call on His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to, 1, acknowledge that though the Minerals Income Investment Fund and its special purpose vehicle may be legal without public input, it fundamentally goes against his pact with the Ghanaian people, particularly the mining communities, to cede 20% of mineral royalties to develop the communities. 2, to suspend the implementation of the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act until all documents relating to the establishment of the special purpose vehicle and its beneficial owners have been disclosed. As concerned Ghanaians, we sought to assess the transaction documents on the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act Secretariat, only to discover that it has none. 3, establish a multi-stakeholder process to review all options to optimize the mineral royalties in order to secure risk-free revenue to the state. Gold royalty is the most certain revenues to the state. Even though commodity prices tend to be cyclical, gold has only oscillated within 20%, which makes it a more stable commodity than oil. And with oil losing demand growth to alternative fuels, gold is expected to continue to exhibit some stability as a source of revenue. 4, to recognize that by its current approach to the implementation of the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act, government may appear to be encouraging citizens to transact business in tax havens. Ours is a struggle against the elite capture of resources that commonly belong to all Ghanaians. And we call on every one of us, regardless of our political persuasion, to join hands in safeguarding the national interest.
If you build schools, if you build health infrastructure, how do you make profit to pay shareholders? You see the deception? Schools, social intervention like schools, like hospitals. Where do you make that profit to declare dividend? And why would investors around the world invest in an SPV whose job would be to do what government of Ghana does in terms of building schools? He stated at a press conference that these 12 mining companies, it brings in about $150 million. If you get $150 million per annum and you want to build schools, you want to build hospitals, wouldn't you better use the money? Why do you want to send the money abroad to a company established in a tax haven and then say that that company will then bring the money back to build hospitals and schools and expect to make profit from hospitals and schools in Ghana and then go back there and pay shareholders? What kind of a nonsense story is this? Look, my brother, we are all Ghanaians and we all want the betterment of this country. This ministry under this government is being extremely deceptive. They don't want to tell you the truth, that they are borrowing money and they will service that debt with our mineral royalties. That is what they are doing. But you see, they think that they are so clever that they can dribble all of us. Okay, if they will be ready, if they will build schools, go and check their incorporation. Go and check their incorporation. Is that their mandate? To build hospitals is not the mandate of Agyapa.
If you look at it, the mineral investment, mineral incomes investment fund, it's the entity established by law. So they, of course, will take, government owns, remember, 51% of this. And so government takes back what it gets and then does investment with it from our end.
Go and check the relationship agreement. We are giving them so much indemnity. In fact, there's even an indemnity agreement. We are even confirming that we'll deal with Agyapa at arm's length, and that when we give them the money, they will decide what to use the 75.6% of our royalties for. So this issue of schools, this issue of whatever, is a complete lie.
If even as individuals we're not allowed to hide our money in tax havens, why will government of Ghana mortgage our gold royalties to a private company in which we have 51% shares? Some shady individuals we don't know have taken 49% shares. On what basis did they take those shares? Agyapa is a very shady deal, and I'm saying if I become president, I will not respect that agreement. It is a theft of Ghanaians' royalties. It's against the money laundering rules, and if you even look at those who put the transaction together, they are people close to the president. Already almost $2 million have been paid to them. It looks like there's a certain impunity that has developed, and this president and his family and those around him think they can do anything and get away with it.
That from the, again, information that is coming out, which government is here to validate or to confirm, but which appears to be authentic because of the silence. When it comes to the fund managers, Ghana's ownership is 51%. It's not 100% as we are being, told in the case of the domiciled, companies. 49%.
How do you come by that information?
I say that is the information that is out.
Yeah, but government has come out to say that is not the case. They say
the fund managers.
I mean, yes.
No, we're not talking. We're talking about the Minerals Development Fund. We're talking about MIF itself, which are 100% government owned. That's what government has clarified. I'm not aware that they have come to clarify that the fund managers,
as in Agyapa.
No, the fund managers,
okay,
who are going to support, Agyapa in the transactions,
okay,
have, a 49% interest. I think it's important again.
They have 49% interest in Agyapa. Is that what you're
no,
saying?
in any transaction that is done.
Right.
That's what fund managers do. So the point is that government has 51, so the beneficial owners for that 49. As I said, this is documents that are out, and I'm just flagging it as important, therefore, to come to Parliament, with this information so that I can put, these things to rest. So these are, other wrinkles, to this whole transaction.
So, in effect, what you want is more information concerning the whole agreement.
It is a law.
It's not as if
under our constitution.
So it is not as if government is engaged in wrongdoing, but what you want is more information.
Law. Remember our previous argument? I'm saying that is a law. That is not like the tax evasion avoidance.
Let me just refer to a letter from Attorney General, and then you understand the episode.
Yes.
This is 12 August. Tio, we refer to our various advice dated 1st April 2019, 28th May 2020, 22nd July 2020, and 5th August 2020, and the transaction advisors' comments dated 12 June 2020, 22nd July 2020, respectively, on the investment for the proposed monetization of Ghana's mineral royalties. What must I say? Now, this is the final document, because one leaky way, they are doing it for a purpose. Attorney General said, we have reviewed the latest letter under reference and the submitted draft agreements and know that our comments have been incorporated and changes effected to the draft agreements.
Which draft agreement went to Parliament?
Precisely.
You're welcome back. So you've heard several voices, and the matters that they raise, we will interrogate them. Former President John Mahama is talking about what he says they will not respect this deal if they should come to power in the December elections. Of course, the NDC MPs in Parliament already sounded this caution and warning in Parliament, I think on the 13th of August, was it? Yeah, when the issue was being debated and they staged the walkout. They said they didn't want to have anything to do with it because it was most unpatriotic and unconscionable. Conscionable? Is that a word the Attorney General had used? But is she still sticking to it? Then you heard also Seth Tekpe, who says cost to the country in this deal is much higher. How much? We'll get you all of that. John Jenapo, you heard earlier. And then Gabi Ochiridako yesterday, mounting a very, very, very strong defense, passionate defense, as documents came out revealing that the Attorney General had issues with it. It does appear that only a part of the documents were released, and that some documents that were later in time that appear to have okayed the agreement were not released. And so he got very angry about what he thought was deliberate, misleading information thrown out to the public for a certain propaganda benefit. Well, the CSOs, civil society organizations, that say this is opaque and smacks of elite capture, were led by Dr. Steve Manteyao. And Dr. Steve Manteyao, you have known him with the ISODEC, you have known him to be associated with the alliance of CSOs working on the extractive and anti-corruption and good governance sector of the country. All they had to say will interrogate them one by one, including what the government has been telling us through the Deputy Finance Minister, Charles Edu Boahen. He should be here in a moment, and then we will commence our discussion. Meantime, this show is brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Consolidated Bank Ghana, we stand with you. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. We lead, we build home for you. Star Assurance, your solid partner. And Rehoboth Properties, they are the kindest sponsors of this program. So let's have your views also. We'll be sharing them if you have questions for the minister or any of the parties that's doing this discussion this morning. Let's have your questions. Remember, if you are tweeting, to tweet #Newsfile, and send all your questions in, and we will deal with them in due course. You're still here on Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. We'll be right back.
My response to that, and I've been asked that already, is that firstly, ALA happens to be the local partner for the English law firm that we're using on this transaction, White & Case. So they work hand in hand with them. So they came in with White & Case as their local partners. We're also using Bella, which is also another law firm. And the gentleman in question that was referred to happens to be a partner in ALA, but there are several other partners, and it's a partnership. These law firms are set up as partnerships. And in fact, the partner we're working with on this is another partner altogether, and not the gentleman in question. So really, we did not see any conflicts there at all. And to be honest, when you're working on such a transaction and you want to be listed on the London Stock Exchange, they're very particular and extremely diligent in their due diligence, even to the extent of looking at all your advisors, transaction advisors, to ensure that they're comfortable with them and are very and are clear that there are no conflicts whatsoever there as well. And also to deal with my good friend Kofi Osafo in the selection process, we engaged as part of, when we started this in 2018, as part of the whole process, we also engaged a headhunting firm, and the firm is called Konferry, Kornferry. They are based out of California. They are a global headhunting firm, and we asked them to help us identify and shortlist a candidate for the CEO position, for the CFO position for Agyapa, and also for the board. And they scoured the whole globe. We said our preference for the Ghanaian, for the CEO position, was that it should be a Ghanaian, and ideally also for the chairman of the board. That was the reason. It was just that. It just happened to be a coincidence that he happens to be somebody we know and happens to be a relative of somebody who is already in the government. I happen to also know him because we went to the same school. He was a year ahead of me in school. So, I mean, I don't think that was also a coincidence. It could have been anybody else. So, it was just about finding the right person for the job. But there were other people, Ghanaians, but most of them were actually just miners. They had worked in a mine and had, in mining engineers, had a lot of mining experience, but had very little finance experience, very little equity experience, very little private equity and investment experience. So that didn't work too well.
Our governments and our people get far less than what we deserve. We are placed at the bottom of the list of the beneficiaries of our own riches, whether it is gold, cocoa, timber, oil, bauxite, or diamonds. The story has been the same everywhere. This is predominantly to do with the fact that our value extraction ends at the point at which these resources leave our shores. Unfortunately, analysis undertaken over an extended period has shown that the largest increase in value occurs at exactly this point when it leaves our shores, where raw resources leaves the country and is converted into either refined products or monetizable securities. 500 times more gold is traded every day than is mined. Much of this happening in countries that have very little gold themselves. President Akufo-Addo is clear in his mind that to achieve a Ghana beyond aid, we must add considerable value to what we produce and trade with anyone. I saw one of the letters in which it talked about indecent haste and that there's no national emergency. If COVID is not a national emergency, I don't know what is. That there's a lot of, what do they call it? A lethal disadvantage to go to the stock market at this time. And this is the best time for the pricing of gold. I mean, if you don't take advantage of this, when else would you be able to? But I think, the issue that really was hurtful and made me discount the letter was when they ended saying that we are trying to stop elite capture, which essentially meant that we here are doing this for ourselves and we have some shares in that. So if that frames the mindset in which it was brought, it makes it really very difficult to see whether it is genuine or it's intended. Because you've seen us operate for 3.5 years, in which all we have done is to follow this Akufo-Addo plan to make sure that everybody benefits. And so to talk about elite capture was for me a very painful issue. The challenge for me, it's, the opposition has been aware of this transaction since 2018 and have been part of the discussions, negotiations, etc. I can only hazard that because it's close to elections, they may feel that there's a political advantage of some sort. But it's not hasty, it's not new. And I saw some of them in the committee discussions, so obviously in which they were supportive of all of that. So there must be a new element, and the only element I can see is 102 days away, when December 6th. And so, but they are doing their job as opposition, so we can do that.
You are sacrificing over $200 million cash flow for a stake on the market. You have to tell the Ghanaian people how much you're going to generate.
You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as you know, always, we put Ghana first. So you have heard CSOs, opposition, persons who are experts, absolutely neutral as far as the political banter is concerned, speak their mind on this issue. It does appear so far it's only the government that finds everything good about the Agyapa deal. Those who are speaking, do they really have a case? We will interrogate all of those issues right here this morning. Let me welcome Bright Simmons of MP degree and honorary executive of Imani Africa. Bright, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning very much, Samson.
Right. So, Kweku Baako is editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. I introduced him earlier. He's here. His documents were here ahead of time. Welcome, Kweku.
Thank you, my brother.
Right. And as I indicated to you, we'll also be speaking to Steve Manteao, who has a lot of expertise in this area and belongs to the alliance of CSOs in the extractive industry and anti-corruption CSOs that spoke against this deal. Charles Boahen is the Deputy Finance Minister, and he's the one we've been waiting for a while. I'd actually wanted to start with him. Unfortunately, he's not here yet. So we will start anyway. Now, if you like, let me begin going to Bright Simmons. And Bright, I have just this morning cited, you have released, I suppose Imani Ghana didn't release this earlier, you have just released a statement in which is an Imani alert, and you explain why the CSOs oppose the current Agyapa deal. So let's begin with you. What are your major issues with the deal?
Thank you very much, Samson. I have a view that it will be useful to re-emphasize why the input of CSOs are critical in this matter, because we've heard some comments. I think some comments from the Minister of Information may suggest that civil society organizations are perhaps not very relevant in this discussion. Well, those were not his exact words, but you could construe some of his comments to mean that. I think when you look at this transaction and you realize that you need more than 300 pages of documents just to get a handle on the key terms and provisions, to suggest that ordinary citizens who are going about their business and are busy with the day-to-day management of their lives will be reading these documents to make an informed democratic view of whether they support the government or not. Is completely naive.
Apart from the information minister, because you couldn't quote him directly, the finance minister himself had said this, that he was pained, that it was painful for the CSOs to use words like elite capture. And then he said, this has been very public. Then he said he discounted the letter that these CSOs issued. So that's one of those comments.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So discounting the letter means he regards the letter as irrelevant. The point of the matter is that you have more than 300 pages of documents. You yourself, as a senior journalist in this country, you've seen those documents. To expect that an ordinary citizen with all the day-to-day hassle of living in Accra or Kumasi or Sunyane will be able to go through these documents to make an informed position about whether or not they support the government is completely unrealistic. So it's the role of organizations like us and ours to spend time to go over these documents so that we can provide a dispassionate and objective perspective that can help ordinary citizens to also come to some conclusions that are informed and balanced. And that role, I think, is quite critical, given the fact of politics as we see it. Unless the position is that once somebody is elected and then sent to Parliament or sent to the Jubilee House, that person has the complete authority to disregard any further views of citizens in the way that they formulate policy. I don't think that is sound. Having made that point, I need to also establish that it's a very multidisciplinary document.
Now, hold on. So what you just said, the concerns you just raised, Steve Mantea, Dr. Steve Mantea raised the same concern that once we have voted for you, it's not over. So you don't suggest as though once we voted for you, it's a blank check. You do whatever you want, and then we have no participation. Then I've heard Professor Kwesi Prempeh also, express disquiet about the posture and attitude. Does that suggest, from the statement you have made, that at the time of going to the press, the CSOs had familiarized themselves with what was necessary, and so knew enough to make the categorical statements that they made?
For those specific CSOs that have come out to oppose this agreement in its current form, yes. We have looked at every single document. We have looked at that. In fact, we've even gone further to look at some of the advice that have been tendered by Merrill Lynch and other advisors of the government. We've done extensive benchmarking using data that's available in other countries. I would say that on account of the simple sheer facts, we are the most informed segment of the society as at this point to help the public come to terms what is fairly a fairly elaborate arrangement that the government has decided to pursue.
Right. So if that were the case,
and the other,
if that were the case, at the time of this press conference, the CSO has suggested that they needed to know the beneficial owners. Has the listing been done? Have the shares been bought yet? The 49% shares that will be offloaded. Have they yet been bought? So who are the beneficial owners that you are interested in?
We have two entities that are already existing, Agyapa Royalties Ghana and Agyapa Royalties. Government purportedly owns 100%, right?
That's so.
The concern that have been raised is that there were claims being made. There were what you might call deep throat claims being made, that there were already nominee positions being held by the government on behalf of some investors. We don't have that fact for now, for sure, but we thought it would be useful for the government to completely dispel those rumors. So whether or not Agyapa, as is currently listed in the bailiwick of Jersey, or Agyapa, the one that is incorporated in Ghana, and the 100% share that government holds, there are no agreements, secret agreements that holds any stake or equity in those vehicles for any transactional advisor or bank or whatsoever. For that fact, we were making it clear that it would be helpful for the government to completely dispel the rumors that were circulating. This was not an emphatic claim that we know for sure that some beneficial holders are using government as nominee shareholders for their stakes in those structures. The other point that I thought was important that we make is that it's also a very multidisciplinary transaction. To properly evaluate it, you need some perspective from finance, from policy, from law, indeed, even from natural resource governance. In order for an effective discussion to be had, a platform like the CSO organizations, which have those skills spread across multiple organizations, is a perfect counterparty for the government in engaging some of these discussions for the benefit of the general public. And we felt, therefore, that it was quite unfair for the government to suggest that not engaging the CSOs was the right course to pursue. I must also emphasize that since we reached the zenith of government CSO interaction and relationship management in this country, I will say this government is the one that has seen the least need to engage with CSOs comprehensively and holistically when it comes to policy making.
Right. So before you proceed, the truth
of the matter is that you've never seen CSOs consistently come together to oppose government policy as you've seen in this administration. And the reason is simply that the government does not think it needs the inputs of CSOs at all. Right. But those are just preliminary comments. Can I go now to make my comments?
No,
yes,
now I need to ask a second question, because you say that these CSOs had familiarized themselves sufficiently with the documentation and therefore could make the conclusive statements that they were making. For example, how come therefore that they suggest that the tax exemptions that are being dealt with and the need, for example, to resort to a tax haven was something that was very strange, when in fact the parent law that was made in 2018 provides in section 35 that the minimal income paid to the fund and dividend payable by the fund or special purpose vehicle are not taxable.
I know where you're going. No, that is not the point. The point is that tax efficiency is not the only reason people list in tax havens. You understand that? Tax efficiency is just one benefit. The other benefit is secrecy. The other benefit is reduced public scrutiny of certain types of transactions. The other benefit for which reason people list in tax havens is the ability to make share transfers that are less tax exposed, etc., etc. Now, those same reasons are why CSOs are worried that a sovereign wealth fund, for its very first major vehicle, would decide to choose the bailiwick of JC. There's also the fact, and that is why I have to probably start getting into our substantive points now, perhaps with your permission.
Yes, let's go.
It's also the fact that given the way that this deal has been structured, the fact that it's listed in tax haven offers no further advantage. Now, I'll go into the substantive points, and I'll limit them for now to 4 critical ones. There's several. In fact, we've done a lot of, we've made a lot of effort to try to look for something in the agreement to commend it to Ghanaians, and we're struggling. But these are the 4 key ones. One is that the $1 billion valuation for 75.6% of our royalties indefinitely in almost all the major gold producing assets that we have. Remember, the prospective licenses, the existing mining licenses, the royalty entitlements that we are investing into this vehicle covers virtually 100% of all our gold resources. So the argument that somehow it does not is not very realistic. There are about 5 gold companies in this country that produce 80% or more of the gold that we produce in the formal sector. Remember that in the informal sector, we are still struggling to tax those activities. So in the formal sector, more or less, we're giving 75.6% of all our gold to this entity. The remaining amount, remember, is completely incumbent. The remaining amount goes to the Mineral Development Fund, which is disbursed among a number of agencies. The 4.6% or whatever it is that remains, 4.4% or whatever that remains, is for the MRI's own bureaucratic use and also for the ministry. So in those circumstances, more or less, all our gold is going away. That is the reality of that transaction.
They have clearly identified. They have clearly identified 16 of the companies, 12 of them that are actually in the business, and 4 of them are supposed to be in the exploratory state. So is it accurate? Is it accurate to say all?
We see 48 assets in the agreement, from prospecting licenses and the rest of it. So this is one of the things that we wait for the minister to come and explain. They mentioned that there are 12 and then there's 4. We count 48. The schedules to the agreement includes the cadastral maps, etc., the whole range of transactions. The fact is that it's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that the 16, even if there were those 16 companies that they've identified, Chirano, Newmont, Goldfields, and Lugo Ashanti, Asanko, etc., those are 100% of our gold production. And the most valuable resources that we have for further prospecting have also been added. Furthermore, they have something called the optional mining licenses in the agreement, which purpose to grant the same structure the capacity to actually get more. So if additional discoveries were made that were outside the remit of this, they have rights of first refusal, because the way that it's been structured, they are preemption rights. So more or less, we didn't all go to this entity. There's no discussion of that. I'll tell you for a fact that if you look at those companies and look at the current gold production and you map them, there is no other room for any significant gold production in this country that does not go to Agyapa. So to give it away at $1 billion valuation is problematic. And it's a very tricky point. So I need to take my time and explain it a little bit. One, first of all, we say that this $1 billion is too little. And at the same time, we make the argument they may not even get the $1 billion. Now, let me explain why. One, the reason is very simple. To choose to go to the public stock markets as opposed to the private markets for this transaction was the fundamental transactional flaw at its heart. The public markets provide investors. These are the best investors in the world. These are the investors with the deepest pockets in the world. They have the best instruments available. They have so many avenues to expose themselves to the positives of gold, like exchange-traded funds, index funds, etc., that they are not that enthused about investing in an asset like this. So when you look at the price-earnings ratio analysis, and we look at the one that Merrill Lynch has done, we don't think it's very smart because it doesn't look at PER at the time of IPO, a few months at IPO. It looks at price-earning ratios now. If you look at it at the time of IPOs, and you look at the current entity that is listed on the London Stock Exchange, in fact, the only gold royalty streaming company similar to the one we want to set up on the London Stock Exchange today, on the main bourse, that is Anglo-Pacific Group, you will see that price-earning ratios in the region of about 5, which is exactly what we are aiming to hit. What that means is that that valuation of $1 billion on the public market is as good as it gets. The problem is that why do we need the public markets if all we're trying to do is to raise some money up front and then later get some cash flow? The worst thing you can do is to go and lock all your royalty streams indefinitely into a transaction where you more or less get all the money up front and there's no other fiscal room, but that money that you get is far less than you could get if you went to any of the hundreds of gold streaming companies in the world, from Franco-Nevada, we've seen that they've analyzed, from Osisco, from Metalla, from Maverick, there are hundreds of them. And you told them that we want to assign 20% or 15% of our royalties for over 10 or 15 years to you. You will get similar to what you're trying to get from the stock market, that $500 million out of the $1 billion valuation that we are trying to squeeze out. You will get it if you went directly to gold streaming companies and did that transaction. But better than that, you would then still have about 50-something% more, maybe even 60% of your royalties still available to receive in the form of cash flow. The problem with this transaction, this structure, this is my second point, the problem with this structure is that you don't get the royalties going forward. So the idea that somehow it's debt, because it's not a debt transaction, it's good for our books, is purely, in my view, naive. Because next year, you won't have the $200 million that you could make from gold, right? Now, if you don't get that money next year, you're going to borrow to plug that shortfall. So this is merely deferring. But more problematically, if you only spend a small part of the transaction directly in a private market transaction, and got the money, you will still have a lot of royalties remaining, which will then ensure cash flow. The argument the government has made is that dividends.
Yes. The issue you raise about next year needing money and it's not being available, is that not what exactly the government is seeking to do? That I get so much upfront, which would not have been available to me this year. So I get as much as I may have gotten in the next, say, 5 years upfront to do what I need to do. So next year, I'm not expecting that money.
Okay.
Except,
let me explain that because that's an important
except that what the $500 million coming in is equity, it is not loan. And then Ghana still has 50 plus 1% in this vehicle. And the entity will be dealing and trading. And the profits that will come, the dividends that will come,
it doesn't work like that.
Ghana will still benefit.
My time to break it down. It doesn't work like that. First of all, those are distinctions without a difference. The amount of money that we are raising upfront is too small to justify losing access to the cash flow over the term of the agreement. Remember, this is an agreement with no effective term, a point I will come to subsequently. So what is the problem? Here is the problem. When you decide to borrow, to receive this money at the in the current structure of the deal, the argument that somehow you're not paying interest is not very smart. Let me tell you why. The cost of listing on the stock market and the continued cost of maintaining it on the stock market can be in the region of between 7 to 10%. So we're going to spend, if we raise $1 billion, we could potentially spend, and that's the very important point, we could potentially spend $70 million pursuing $1 billion. It's not that difficult. If you look at the fees for brokers, fees for lawyers, fees for other transaction advisors, etc., you could conceivably get to that amount. And don't forget, any underwriter is going to charge fees. Significantly, it will be fees that are a percentage of funds raised. Now, that means that you need to treat that as an interest rate because it behaves similarly. But even though you are getting the money upfront, it's more or less a 1-year term transaction if you want to do some benchmarking. And you have to compare that against the fact that this is a country that for 7-year transaction with a 7-year life, we often pay something in the region of 6.5%. So if you are paying something close to 10% to raise the money, to think that that is not an effective interest rate is playing with the semantics. So whether it's interest rate or you call it something else, the costs are important. And the cost of this structure is quite prohibitive if you consider other alternatives. The second point is this. Because you are undervaluing the asset by using the public listing approach, as opposed to doing a private market transaction. And why do we know that? We know that because we've looked at several IPOs, including the famously aborted one by Triple Flag, and then looked at several private market transactions involving gold royalty streaming companies, compared them, and we found that it's much more efficient to raise the money in a private market transaction than to list on the stock market. So that is one reason why we know for sure that the valuation of $1 billion could be much improved. Then on top of it, if you were to then decide to go on the private market route and therefore raise the valuation, you could get as much money upfront as you are trying to do now, but you will still have royalties left, which will guarantee you cash flow going into the future. So my argument would be, why will you not go for the best of both worlds? Why will you want to pack all of it into this structure and then list in a time when we know for sure?
All right, so Bright Simmons, the connection to Bright Simmons, it's having a little bit of a challenge. We will re-establish it and then get back to you. So Bright Simmons is representing the CSOs that are against this deal, and he's explaining why we have better options. He's explaining why, for example, they suggest that the $1 billion valuation of these massive resources or resource entitlement is unconscionable and amounts to undervaluing Ghana's resources by over 65%. That's the claim that they make. They suggest that less than 25% of future royalties should go for that amount of money in any such transaction. Their position, as you have heard him explain, is backed by a review of several royalty streaming transactions around the world. So they insist that a private market transaction would be superior to a public listing in this regard. Of course, he began by canvassing for us what they are appalled at by pronouncements by some ministers. Particularly, he names the information minister, and also we've heard a finance minister talk about how he was hurt by the claim by these CSOs that there was an elite capture and that there was opacity and that there was a lethal disadvantage, their own words, in this deal. And because of that, the finance minister said he discounted the letter. That is, their concerns put together in a letter. He discounted it. Several other CSO leaders have said this is wrong. And he states that it is in this regime that you have the CSOs almost always having to come together collectively. So if there was an issue with the election procurement matters or whether there should be registration, you had over a double dozen CSOs coming together. If you have Daniel Yao Domelevo being removed, quote unquote removed,
thank you,
then they come up and you have in excess of 400 CSO leaders signing to disapprove and ask the government to recall him. In this matter, there are 12 CSO organizations coming together, and they say they have studied the documentation around this thing, and their conclusion is that this is very bad. If for nothing at all, they say that it is unconscionable and amounts to undervaluing Ghana's resources by over 65%. They say that we can get what we are asking now without putting 75% of our mineral royalties, but by putting only 25% of our mineral royalties. Charles Boahen is getting ready to join us now. Then he will help us to go ground zero, break down when we started, where we are now, and answer the questions that are associated with this development. Bright is back. Hello, Bright.
Sorry, Samson.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure where I got cut off.
No. So clearly you are done. You are done with canvassing your point to explain that we are undervaluing the Ghana's resources by over 65%, and that we can get what we are looking for if we did private listing rather than public, and we could use only 25% rather than the 75%. So the next point is what?
Okay, so no, I wasn't talking about a private listing. I was saying that in the private markets. So say you went to Franco-Nevada or any of these companies that do gold streaming, and you did a direct contract with them. If we look at the tenure of transactions and the trend in transaction valuation over the last couple of years, we've concluded they would have made far more in a direct contract with a gold streaming company than seeking to create a vehicle and list it. So that was the point that I was making. And I was saying, therefore, that if they did that, they will raise the same amount of money, but we'll still have royalties left, which will guarantee us cash flow going into the future. So it's both upfront money and also cash flow rich. What we have now is that it's only upfront money, not very cash flow rich. And the reason why it's not cash flow rich is because the dividend yields in these type of transactions are bad. So you cannot really rely on dividends for cash flow going forward.
In fact, where traditionally, mineral royalty companies look to pay dividends in about 30%, this deal, we are seeking to pay as much as 50% in dividends. That's what the minister tells us.
Well, it makes, I don't understand what that means.
They suggest that this company, if it lives up to why it is set up, it could double or even triple the gains in the next 2 years.
Well, that's capital gains, which is a completely different conversation. We'll come to that. But when it comes to dividends, we have a lot of experience in this country where government owns 10% equity interest in a bunch of almost all the mining firms, apart from, I think, Newmont and AngloGold Ashanti. And AngloGold Ashanti, we own equity in the global structure. So we own almost 2% in AngloGold Ashanti globally. And ask how much we received in dividends from AngloGold Ashanti. Last I checked, I think this was about 2018, we're doing something in the region of about $300,000, and the year before or the year after, we're doing something in the region of $570,000. So dividends have never been an effective cash flow mechanism, and we need an effective cash flow mechanism. If you look at some of the other peer companies in the gold streaming business that are listed, those that have characteristics similar to ours, we are looking at dividend yields that are very low. And because dividend yields are low, this is not an efficient cash flow structure. That is the point. So now I move on to my third point. Can I do that with your permission?
Yes, please proceed.
My third point is in relation to the legal structure of the agreement. We've taken note of successive pieces of advice by the Attorney General. And those elements of advice that have been given are not reflected in the final documents, particularly the agreements that have been signed, and also, even in some respects, in the way that we've gone ahead to change some of the statutory regimes. Particularly, I'll focus on the agreements.
Yes, please, can we do it this way? Can we do it this way?
Yes, I'll do it very quickly.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. Bright, hold on. Bright, hold on. You say that advice given by the Attorney General, our lawyer, as in the citizens and the government's lawyers, have not reflected in the agreements.
Yes.
I like us to take that point by point. The Attorney General's very final communication raises issues with seven outstanding concerns it had raised earlier in the first and in its second advice, which it said had not been incorporated, and therefore, subject to incorporating those, the deal was above board. It was okay. So let's take them one by one. So you show us how exactly you come to the conclusion that these do not reflect. Number one, the Attorney General said, we have maintained in all our advice to the Ministry of Finance that the assignment agreement should receive parliamentary approval. Please refer to our advice dated 28th May 2020, 22nd July 2020, and 5th August 2020. So number one, assignment agreement should be approved by Parliament. This has been done. This has been done.
Because you go on, because I think I get your point, but there is a challenge. We've seen the letters starting from the one in 28th May, the famous 28th May one, all the way through the 22nd July one, the 5th August, and a couple of others. Now, what is the fact? Is that you can see the arguments that were raised about certain provisions and terms in the agreement as they continue. And then you can see that 12th August letter from the Minister of Justice, where she proposed to suggest that these are actually the outstanding matters. They don't correlate. And I'll show you why. I will very quickly prove to you why.
No, I was hoping, Bright, I was hoping that we could go in a certain procedure. We know that they had the back and forth, but the eventual outcome is the 12th of August 2020
and that is why I'm trying to explain to you how that came
which is on the revised version of the project or the agreement.
So let me explain very clearly, because this is very important.
Yes, but here, the Attorney General's concerns remain 7 items.
No, that's not correct.
There are 7 items. Please, that's correct. There are 7 items.
Let me explain the reason why that's not correct.
No, there are 7 items. If you say that's not correct, I am unable to agree with you, because the Attorney General's document has 7 items.
No, the reason is simple. It has raised issues in previous letters which have not been addressed. Those issues remain in the final agreement, but in its 12th August letter, it claims that these are the outstanding issues. So what that means, therefore, is that it had abandoned the earlier recommendations.
No, it had not abandoned the earlier recommendations, Bright. Please, can we take it line by line? It has not abandoned. It says, if you don't mind, let's read it. It says, we refer to our various advice dated 1st April 2019, 28th May 2020, 22nd July 2020, and 5th August 2020, and the transaction advices TA comments dated 12 June 2020 and 22nd July 2020, respectively on the Kingdom investment arrangement for the proposed monetization of Ghana's mineral royalties. We also refer to the meeting held on the 10th of August 2020 and your subsequent letter number so and so, together with the draft agreement. The letter indicates that our earlier comments on the draft agreements have been duly incorporated. This is the word I was coming to. We have all the time, Bright. Relax. We have all the time for today. Today we are discussing only this. So the Attorney General says the issues we raise in the draft agreement have been duly incorporated and request our final review and no objection. Then she says, you have incorporated them, except 7 other issues.
No.
Why are you saying no? I'm reading to you.
Very carefully. No, relax. We have the letters from the very beginning, 28th May, 22nd July, etc. You understand me?
That's right.
We know the issues that were raised in them, right?
That's right.
If we look at the final agreement and we see that those issues have not been resolved, it does not matter what the Attorney General said on 12 August. Does that logic come across clearly to you? We know the issues that were raised in 28th May.
what I'm relating to you, Bright, what I'm relating to you is not what the Attorney General has not said. What I'm relating to you is what the Attorney General has said. But you have an issue. You have an issue with what the Attorney General has said.
The Attorney General's position.
Okay.
You understand my point?
Okay.
We dispute the Attorney General's position.
Okay.
We have seen the letters from the Attorney General to the Finance Minister dated 28 May.
Proceed and demonstrate to us.
So when you take the suggestion that was made in the previous advice, particularly 22nd July, that there should be a fixed term to the transaction, preferably 30 years, because most mining leases are 30 years. That is not reflected in the final agreement. In the final agreement, the counterparty, the beneficiary in this case, the counterparty in this case, Agyapa, still has the capability for successor agreements and renewal leases to be considered as part of the original term. So there's still no fixed term. Now, that was a point that was raised and canvassed earlier on by the Attorney General. If for some reason by the 12th of January, after meeting the Finance Minister, the Attorney General decided to abandon its own line of advice, that is not to say that they were dealt with.
All right. Now, Bright, on that issue, doesn't the agreement say that the time, if there's a term limit, it is tied to the lease that the mining concessions or operators have? Is that not what it says?
So, the life of the lease,
and when
the life of the lease,
yes,
it incorporates renewals, incorporates replacements, etc.
Exactly.
Which was the point that our own advisors, even before we saw the Attorney General's document, had raised. So when we saw the Attorney General's document and we saw that that was reflected, we were quite surprised that the Attorney General will abandon that line of advice, because we think it's a very critical piece of advice. To create an indeterminate, an agreement of indeterminate life, using the Attorney General's own argument, is completely unconscionable. So that is one.
Right.
Secondly,
now hold before we go to the second issue. Hold on, Bright. The thing is tied to the life of a license. The license has an expiration date.
Yes.
But we say, whilst it is tied to the life of the license of the operator, if the operator renews their license, it will continue to be in force. Now, if I am dealing with you in this regard, is it not possible at any time to determine that I am not interested in the relationship? What is our fear?
No. What I'm saying is that when you take any lease, so there are 2 points here. Because of the fact that the government retains some discretion for extensions, replacements, etc. When you tie the agreement to the life of a lease, effectively you have an indeterminate end point, because that lease life could extend. The second point is that because we've added prospecting licenses to the portfolio, we have to wait till they convert. And if they were to convert 10 years later, because of whatever reasons, and there are a lot of discretion in the mining laws, that time begins from then, because now you have another lease. So effectively, this could continue for a very long time. Let me give a very good example that will be interesting also. When you take Christy Asankofa, the nature of the entire structure of that particular opportunity is that we are recovering gold waste. Now, it's a potential. It's very easy to assume that a lot of these assets that we have, new technologies will come up that will make it possible to renew the life of those mines to a much longer extent than we've been able to do so far. So the fact that the term is not indeterminate is beyond dispute and beyond debate. Let me go on to my second example.
Okay, so Bright, Bright, before we get to the second example,
yes,
what is the fear about the term being indeterminate? Where
because
wait, can I finish my question? Where you have parties who sort of have equal powers. In fact, that Ghana will have 50 plus 1% in the transaction. So what is the fear about the term not being fixed?
That 50.51% is not cast in stone. That is also something that the public has not properly evaluated. That 51% could be overturned if there's an oversubscription and they exercise their right to give away additional equity. So there's no 51% that's cast in stone. That's one. Number two,
the assurance is that Ghana will keep 51%. So we should take them by their word.
The agreement offers the option for Ghana not to do that. The second point that is important is that if we had wanted to maintain control, then if you go to the listing, you find out that you can go in as a sovereign-controlled commercial company. That is the only way in which you evade that requirement for independence and arm's length, etc., that we are struggling with. We decided not to go in for a sovereign-controlled company, a structure.
Okay.
We decided to go in as a standard listing. You get my point? So as a standard listing, the independent directors have extraordinary latitude to block us in many, 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 many ways. So we don't have that latitude that you claim we have.
Can you go to your second point?
Changes to the agreement itself will require independent directors
to approve. Go to your second point. So in the first point, you essentially demonstrate by your arguments and you're showing that the Attorney General may have been lying to us when it says that the concerns had been incorporated in the revised version. You say it has not happened.
No, it's not. No, but I'm very clear. It's not lying to us. By the time we get to 12 August, the Attorney General had abandoned its own line of advice.
Okay.
It had abandoned the things it thought was important and has come up with some 7 things that, as far as we are concerned, were trivial.
No, it says that
apart from the parliamentary approval,
it says that what it had advised had been incorporated.
But it hadn't been.
So that's the point I was mentioning to you. That in that case,
it had abandoned its advice.
Do you still say abandoned?
Addressed.
Okay.
It considered them addressed, and we are saying they are not addressed. The second issue that they raise, which the Attorney General thinks is addressed, but we believe is not addressed, is this issue of incidental cost being potential losses. The Attorney General, whoever drafted it, had a very eagle eye, and he had seen that there was an attempt to have indemnification in respect of incidental losses, incidental costs, constructed as potential losses. And so you can't do that because this gives them a huge room to misbehave. That is still in the final agreement. I'll go to the third issue. In many instances, Agyapa is allowed to hold on to an obligation on a best efforts basis. It will do its best. Ghana, however, is held to strict liability in many of these clauses. The Attorney General argued that there was weak reciprocity in a lot of terms. When you read the final agreement that was approved, you'll find out that there are still instances of weak reciprocity. I'll go to the last one. Even though there are several of them, there's no time. I'll go to the last one.
All right.
The reviewer makes a really profound point about the nature of this agreement having become a tool to which now a private company determines stabilization agreements and stabilization terms for Ghana on Ghanaian assets. He said even the Minister of Finance, by law, can only do a 15-year stabilization or development agreement. What this has done for Agyapa is that because any changes that affect it materially, that has a materially adverse effect on Agyapa's money, is bad, or at the very least heavily constrained, it transmutes into operation as a stabilization agreement.
What's the stabilization agreement? What's that concept?
So you know the way the stabilization agreements are drafted. If you are coming to invest in a country, you say, don't make changes in your laws that will affect my profits.
Right.
Right? The country agrees to it. Now, what we have done is that because we've sent royalties, we've apportioned royalties to Agyapa. Agyapa is saying that any changes that are made to these companies whose royalty is going to be getting, that may have an effect on the royalties that it will get. Those changes are constrained. So it operates as a stabilization agreement.
Right.
Now, the Attorney General argued that even the finance minister does not have that wide remit in law. So Agyapa shouldn't be allowed to come through the back door that way. Our argument is that that issue was not addressed in the final agreement. So these are just 4 examples, and there are many. 4 examples.
Okay, so
trivial ones.
Right. So Bright, you hold it on there for me, and I'll come back again and try to understand a couple more of the points that Imani in its alert has raised about the timelines to the fundraising, which you suggest is almost impossible, and so on and so forth. But the Attorney General, in this very final communication to the Finance Minister, indicates that the advice it has given at various points, at least on 4 different occasions, the things it wanted to change, which Bright Simmons acknowledges that those who worked on the agreement at the Attorney General's department did a very good job. They had an eagle's eye and they saw a lot of things that were not good for Ghana, and they pointed them out and insisted that those things ought to be changed. The Attorney General in its last letter says it finds that these earlier comments that it made had been duly, the word they use is duly incorporated, except that if they will continue and go ahead with it, there are 7 other things that remain outstanding that have to be taken care of. Bright suggests to us that whilst the Attorney General suggests in this letter, proclaims in this letter that these are the only things outstanding, it does appear there is more than that. Now, the first thing it asked for was that there are 5 different agreements that relate to this deal. And the first thing the Attorney General asked for was that the assignment agreement needs parliamentary approval. As we know, there were 5 agreements that were taken to Parliament. It included the assignment agreement. The Attorney General wrote this on the 12th, and the whole deal went to Parliament the next day, on the 13th. We will find out, whilst we understand Charles is joining us shortly, whether everything, all the 7 things that the Attorney General spoke about were taken care of. I will try to canvass those I have seen and cross-check that have been taken care of with you. Now, Kweku, so let's see. Generally, preliminary, what would you say overall? If you were making, say, a 2-minute commentary to start with, before you go to any substance, what's your appreciation of this deal as far as it benefits or does not benefit Ghana?
Well, of course, I will not be speaking from the position of an expert, but of course, as an analyst of some of these issues, I've listened to all sides. I find the Minister of Finance's position more persuasive relative to the mission that they have set to undertake. But I want to make a quick point on this civil society organizations and their involvement in such issues. It's very important. I am an advocate of civil society activism and advocacy. And I believe it's very important for democratic consolidation. But there's something that I'm surprised at. The hint, the intention to undertake this exercise didn't begin today. Indeed, if you, as we know, the act itself was passed in 2018.
Okay.
And then if you go to the 2018 and 2019 budgets, there were hints there.
Okay. Before you do that, I need to bring to Bright Simmons' attention 2 quick things I don't want to forget. Bright Simmons had referred to the information minister as being naive. I didn't hear that, but my attention has been drawn to that. Bright, would you want to retract that? I suspect that the information minister has been sufficiently informed on these matters and has been dealing with them. Would you want to retract that?
Sorry, I'm not sure what context naive was used. I don't recall saying the information minister was naive. I might have said that something that he said in respect of the fact that citizens themselves are sufficient to are capable of evaluating these matters.
All right.
If that was the implication of his statement, that would be naive. Doesn't mean that he himself is naive, of course. Thank you.
All right. I thought, though I didn't particularly pay attention, I thought that would be an unfair statement to make on him. Again, last point, the Attorney General says she did not abandon any of her previous positions, and that at each point they gave advice on the basis of documents that were made available to them, and they stuck to their advice from first to the last day. And so they never abandoned any of their advice. Thank you. That's made. Now, Kweku, you were going to 2018, 2019 when yes, the president gave an indication that we'll securitize our minerals royalties.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
but that was very vague. That was nothing really.
Yes, but civil society activism and advocacy implies that you will be on the alert, that you will be searching and researching, you will be following the trail as to what is happening relative to what had been captured in the 2018 budget as well as the 2019.
Oh, but that's not the consultation that they are asking for.
No, you are not allowing me.
You don't want civil... Okay, go ahead.
You are not allowing me.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
Because I'm looking at it from two sides.
All right.
I think they ought to be on the alert. The budget is a public statement. It's a public record. And it is stated there that the government has an intention of doing this. They passed the act, the Minerals Income Investment Fund Act.
Yes.
978. This also was in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
My view, really,
passing the act didn't really mean didn't have the details of what deal you were engaged in.
That is why I say you are preempting me. I'm going step by step, but the act itself spoke of the creation of a special purpose vehicle. So the elements were there. In terms of actualization, yes, I agree, and that's why I was coming, that civil society organizations are very important. I consider them very critical.
All right.
And so I have no problem with civil society organizations calling for consultations and constructive engagement. The problem is when that call was made. To be honest with you, where we have reached, and I'm a realist, Parliament has passed approved agreements.
Yes.
I'm not too sure that the call for suspension of this deal is realistic or sustainable. It is not going to happen. It comes with a lot of integrity challenges. The state, in this case the government, is dealing with so many organizations, both here and outside. They have proceeded to the extent where agreements have been approved by Parliament. The call for reversal, in my candid opinion, is not sustainable. But you see, what worries me is the reading of...
Is it not something that gave rise to the call for reversal? That is what they say, the opacity with the process.
But I'm unable to accept.
Now wait, you refer to, and the finance minister said, this started as far back as 2018. Is that accurate? Because yes, the processes started in 2018 with the law, and subsequently with the amendment of the law this year, so that you can create this special purpose vehicle whose monies and things will not become, subject to question by state organizations. So all these laws that were being made clearly would have given an indication that this is where we are getting to.
Exactly.
But that is not a substitute for what the CSOs are calling for. Engagement, consultation.
I am
the fact that you are laying the foundation it's not the same as you are consulting.
You know, when parliamentary business is being conducted, any serious CSO, and please, nobody should get me wrong that I'm saying that those 15 that have come together are not serious.
Okay.
But anybody knows that parliamentary business, there is the input from the public sector in terms of civil society organizations. Memos and things are delivered to the appropriate committees and to the House.
Right.
I'm surprised that no CSO really knew that some of these things were underway in Parliament. That is a bit surprising.
When the government was taking these things to Parliament, did it engage the CSOs? The CSOs somewhat have come to represent, you know, the voice, the eyes of the general citizenry or the public who cannot, you know, come together and interrogate the issues as they are doing on behalf of the state, on behalf of the, the people.
It would have been ideal if the government had engaged CSOs.
Right.
Because that's my principle. But I'm saying that CSOs too must always be on the alert. The activism requires that they are clearly monitoring what is happening in Parliament. They got to. They must have sections of their organizations that monitor, and I believe some of them do. So, to be honest, to wait till this stage and then to make calls for reversal or suspension, I think it's an unsustainable thing. But you see, what worries me...
Still on that, there is a constitutional imperative, is there not? The minerals of this country, the Constitution in Article 257 says they have been entrusted in the president. It says they are vested in the president on behalf of and in trust for the people. Trust.
Yes.
So this is a trust position.
Yes. That's why it went to Parliament.
Okay. And in trust. Then when you go to the law that was passed, as in the Mineral Investments, Income Investments Act, in Section 36, it talks about transparency as a fundamental principle.
Yes. So the CEOs, they are calling for greater transparency. Not that there was no transparency
There was no consultation.
Yes. I really don't get the point about there was no consultation. Is it, let's read
36.
Read it.
36, transparency. If you are there, you go ahead and read it. 36. 36.
Yes.
Talks about good governance.
Yes. The management of the fund shall be exercised, taking into account the overall consideration that minerals income constitutes proceeds from the exploitation of non-renewable natural resources. B, the overall objective that minerals income and minerals investment is to be managed for the benefit of the current and future generations of the citizens of the Republic. Then 2, the management of and duties associated with the fund shall be carried out in accordance with the highest internationally accepted standards of transparency and good governance. 3, the minister, the board, and the advisory committee in performance of their functions under this act shall take the necessary measures to entrench transparency, accountability, and free access by the public to information.
Right, and you could even stop there.
Yes.
And then you see that when the Attorney General was advising, the Attorney General averted their mind to the Right to Information Act.
Yes.
And said there were things they wanted to do that they needed to change because Ghanaians must have access to the information.
Yes. And right now, all these records, all these things are the public records. They are in Parliament. All these records here are in Parliament, approved by our representatives. Of course, one section decided not to take part in approval, but that doesn't take away the fact that it was approved, sent to Parliament for consideration, deliberation, and approval.
Would we have been here, the nation seized over a week discussing one issue, the ministry, government compelled, literally compelled, to take steps to explain these issues if we had gone through, the bottom-up approach, if you like?
It's an option that could have been exercised. But my observation relative to some of these things. You remember when we embarked on divestiture of the Asante Gold, same things happened. Indeed, some Dr. Jones Ofori Atta, incidentally, Ken's father, Professor Mao Sidake, the late, may he rest in peace, and then Kwame Sifri Ajay, they went to court, if you recall, 1994, battled the point about government reducing our stake from 55% to about 25%. Vodafone, Telecom, you remember, there were all sorts of things, demonstrations and the fact that we didn't need to do it. We've had a history of always having such controversies, even when you do consultations. My key point is that having read the Attorney General's advice, all the 5 put together, having gone through the parliamentary records, I find it difficult to buy into the perception or suspicion of some integrity deficit relative to this exercise. I find it very difficult.
Does it come as a curious situation to you that a day after the Attorney General does the final work, Parliament is saddled with dealing with this thing, and does that give Parliament sufficient time?
Good question.
To do due diligence and play their role of oversight? It's a constitutional imperative.
Indeed, that is one area I've always raised issues with. From 1993 to today, our parliaments have always been challenged with this particular situation, where volumes and volumes of documents are brought to them within the time and space being very constrained, and then they being asked to pass.
And this time they were rising.
It's not new. It's not novel.
Is it right? Looking at the.
It's a bad
looking
practice.
At this thing.
It is a bad practice that has been going on for a long time. Indeed, they just come, they suspend the standing orders and take the process through within, because you should have brought it 48 hours before you could do that. Go and check the Hansard. It's a culture now, almost a subculture in our parliamentary practice. I don't endorse it. Indeed, yesterday I even had to send Randy on his program, Thursday, a copy of an extract from a Hansard when they were dealing with the Kaswa and Obicha Bilamti approval, 2nd October 2014. Madame Oslowusu Ekufu was complaining. She raised that point. And I made a point that you see, when they are in the majority, they are okay with it. When they go into the minority, they are not okay with it. It's a very bad practice that ought to stop. But you see, that is not an excuse for people to begin to generate suspicions and unfounded speculations.
But that's rather a justification for the excuse, because it actually brings the suspicions.
Yeah, but you see, but then that's why we've gone. You've seen the letters.
Yes.
Can you imagine the exchanges between the Attorney General and the Finance Ministry?
I think any fair-minded person looking at the processes will commend the Attorney General for the job they did.
But that tells you, so there was not like a consolidated executive position, let's manipulate something and throw it out there.
All of that is in private.
No, but these are the letters. These are public records now. We have them here.
This is thing being done for future generations.
Yes, I understand. But I'm saying that this shows, this exchanges, tells you straight away that there was not a conspiracy somewhere by a government to actually sell out the country. That's the point I'm making.
Whose fault is it? Because now the government obviously has come under a certain pressure, and I will tell you that these would not have been leaked to anybody.
Well, was it leaked?
These are leaked. These are clearly leaked, and they are leaked so that they can assist the discussion to do away with the suspicions.
Well, if we are talking government communication,
it could have been avoided.
If we are talking government communication, I'm sure you know my position on it. I've been very public that not just government, but the party too, the ruling party and the government in terms of communication. I think there's a certain level of deficit which ought to be addressed. But I'm saying that relative to this project, that is no basis. The inadequacies or perceived or real inadequacies of government communication is no excuse for somebody to come and tell me that, look here, there's a conspiracy to sell this country's resources to foreigners or anybody else. For instance, the question of tax haven. Yes, I know secrecy and all those things are there, but is it an unusual situation? Is this Agyapa group or the only group that would have done that? Talo Ghana Limited, are they not listed in Jersey? Are they not?
Talo is not government of Ghana.
No, I said Talo Ghana Limited. It's Ghana.
No,
you are not getting me.
It's not an entity belonging to the Republic.
Yes, but it is listed, it is doing business in Ghana.
This entity is the Republic's property.
Yes, and what is wrong with that? We own it. And for good reasons, it helps because it would not be...
What is wrong, you ask, is about the levels of accountability. A private entity does not owe you the accountability that a public entity does.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that this private this entity that is owned by us will be engaged in businesses beyond the Ghanaian shores, wouldn't it?
That's right.
Yes. And are there no advantages for it to be listed in the tax haven? There are advantages that come with it.
Let me do this and then you come to continue with this point. Bright, can you assist us with your research to understand something? You know, of course, tax havens, you know, have a certain reputation for being dodgy. But does that make them wrong? Because that is one major thing that is fueling the suspicion. And we are talking about over, is it 1,000 companies from over 60 countries that have been registered in Jersey and listed on the London Stock Exchange. So,
how many of them are sovereign-controlled SPVs that are taking over the royalties entitlements of countries indefinitely? Can you mention one?
Good question.
We made a point that if the government wanted to use the London Stock Exchange as a channel for raising money, while at the same time preserving some of the rights of this country, it had the option to use a sovereign-controlled commercial company route. That is something that exists in the London Stock Exchange they could have utilized. It decided not to do so. It decided to go through a standard listing. And the argument that we are making is that some of the degrees of independence assured that entity shows a strong degree of incoherence in national policy. Why? Because you have a minerals income investment fund where you've more or less made it a plaything of the executive. The president, by several sections, the president can appoint members of the board and even members of the investment committee. He can remove them without explanation. There's so many things that you've done that have made the MIIF not effective. Instead of fixing that, instead you go and create an SPV and then send it to London, claiming that in London to be independent. If you want independence, give it to SPVs that are tied to your own MIIF by amending the law.
Okay, so let's stay with the question I asked and your question that you also asked about whether or not out of this 1,000 that are registered in Jersey and 60 from 60 different countries, which one of them will be, you know, a sovereign country involvement. Once we are seeking to be Africa's first royalties company by Agyapa, what's wrong with it? Assuming there's no country, sovereign country that's involved here.
A royalties company. If it's your private money, you can decide to build Africa's first mass mission focused company, a company that wants to go to the moon. That's brilliant. On the other hand, if you're a publicly owned entity, if the royalties of these countries, 100% literally, of all the gold income on the royalty side, obviously not on the corporate tax side, etc., on the royalty side, are going to go into one vehicle and you're going to list it, people have every right to argue that Ghana needs to preserve some degree of control. And the relationship agreement and the terms in the relationship agreement prevents that. I did not have time to go into that.
So Bright, what you are saying, we isolate the issues and deal them one by one. What you are saying is that there is nothing wrong with a sovereign country wanting to get into this. All that you say ought to be done is better openness, so to speak. Is that not the case?
No, I mean there's 1,000 arguments we could make about the choice of the vehicle, right?
No, you said if you're a private company, you could do that. But if you are...
No, I'm saying that. Let me explain myself. If you decide that royalty money that belongs to Ghana should go to capitalize some entity, you owe the public a much more thorough account of why Ghana is sacrificing control and what we will get back. And I'm saying that even if you wanted to list on the stock exchange, the London Stock Exchange, there is a sovereign controlled commercial company option, which the government could have utilized, which would have preserved a good degree of control and still allowed it to raise money. It decided not to use that. It decided to use the standard listing. And by that action, it is denying Ghana the strong degree of influence to dictate to that company how to use the money that comes from our royalty income. So if the company decides, for instance, that it will not invest in Ghanaian mining assets for whatever reason, it will be very difficult, given the way the company has been structured, to overrule the independent directors, because specifically there is a Chinese wall between the Minerals Investment Income Fund and the rest of the company. And that has been done pursuant to the very strategy that the government is
until the finance ministry decided that we need a certain mind change and to move away from the traditional way we used to do business, where we go into loans. This time, the best and the smart thing to do is to do an equity transaction. We are simply selling shares in a company which will generate profit and pay dividends, and the company will make investments, and the government of Ghana will benefit 51% shareholder. The question to you is, they have laid out what the benefits from this will go into hospital infrastructure, road infrastructure, among other things. Previously, 80% of this royalties went into the consolidated fund, and like they say, disappeared or were used for anything at all. Is this not a smart way of managing our royalties?
So that's not correct. 80% of the royalties went into the Minerals Income Investment Fund. 20% went to the Minerals Development Fund. It's not just royalties, it's also proceeds from our equity interest and some other transactions, in fact. The argument that we are making is that if the government wants to leverage some, let me make one point clear. Using royalty gold streaming is not some invention of the Ghanaian government, right? Since 1986, companies like Franco-Nevada and the rest have done this all over the world. There are several companies that do this. The argument we are making is that if you go through the route of listing on an exchange, you don't get the full benefit of the valuation. And the reason is that institutional investors and others have multiple channels to get exposure to the positives of gold without some of the downsides. And so it's better if the government had gone directly to a royalty streaming company and done a deal. There are many companies in the world who will happily take 20% of Ghana's royalties and give Ghana money. But the question is, you have to compare the two structures. Of course, there are thousands of other ways you could have done it. But we are providing a specific structure versus the government structure. And we are saying when you look at transactions worldwide, comparing the two structures, invariably we find that more money is made in direct transactions. There's a recent one where Wheaton did a deal for Calder Gold's Mamato. When you look at the terms of that particular transaction, isolate the gold portion of it, you find out that the company that was selling Calder Mines was selling its royalties into the future. It was selling 6.5% of its royalties in the future. That company made a much better deal from a valuation point of view than Ghana is making, almost 3 times.
Okay.
So when you do this type of technical analysis, you come to the conclusion that going to list, first of all, creating an SPV, getting very expensive advisors and banks in the UK, paying a huge amount of money to do the listing, and then getting a valuation that we think is lower than you could have got in the private market. It makes no sense to us.
All right.
You could very well have gone to the private markets, done the same deal.
Thank you, Bright. Thank you, Bright. Thank you, Bright. Still stay with us. I'll get Kweku briefly, and then we take a break and return to continue the discussion. Now, Kweku, there's one portion of it. I know you have assembled your material in a way. I'll give you the opportunity to also make your presentation. But there's one point of it where you had the minority in Parliament saying, as they walked out, they said a future NDC government will not honor the contracts. Former President Mahama also has said that he will not want to have anything to do with this if he won the elections. Now, if you go to the amended agreement, there are conditions precedent. That is commencement conditions before the agreement comes into effect. A number of things have to be done. One of it is that there should be unreserved parliamentary approval. Do you think that is affected as we speak now? Because the approval, yes, it was a parliamentary approval, but can it be said to have been unreserved?
No. Parliament is parliament. Walking out of parliamentary business when there's something to be approved, it's not an unusual practice. It's been going on all the time. So Parliament has approved it. That's it. They are entitled, those who say that if, and it's significant that the word is, operative word here is if, they win, they will reverse, it's their right. See, you go through the same parliamentary process. You have to bring a motion for recession in order to change what Parliament has done. So I really wouldn't bother myself about those things. You remember Vodafone? They made the same pledge that the Vodafone deal was, you know, tainted with fraud and all sorts of things, and promised that if they want power, they will take it away. They will review it. If you remember, when they came to power, that is NDC and Professor Mills, President Mills, they set up a Vodafone review committee, which went through it, and there was nothing there for them to review. So the agreement that was passed by the Parliament in August 2008 subsisted. So as for threats to reverse and things,
so get to some specific issues that you may want to address, and maybe do that in some 5 minutes, and we take a break and come back and ask the other questions that Imani and the CSOs raise, including the questions of potential conflict of interest because of the involvement of two people. The law firm that Gabi Asaro-Chiridakon heads is one of the advisors, and then Yaosafo Mafo's son's involvement. Does it mean that once it doesn't matter that people have sufficient expertise, once they are related to some people in government, they should not be involved in any state transaction? Okay, so go ahead.
So, look, I really don't have a difficulty with Gabi's.
No, we'll address that. I wanted you to go through, because you have assembled and you wanted to look at certain points. So you address that. We'll come to the second part and then we'll deal with that.
See, the point I was making, I wanted to make, there is this thing about 51% majority for the Ghana side.
Right.
And I had my...
Right. It's not cast in stone.
It's not cast in stone. But, and that the 49 could turn around to become majority. It will be done transparently, assuming. Because if you go into the relationship agreement, let me see. There's a part, you are the lawyer, so you can educate me on this. The assignment.
Yeah.
It says, this deed is personal to the parties, and accordingly none of the parties without the prior written consent of the other parties shall assign, transfer, charge, or declare a trust of the benefit of all of any of the other parties' obligations, nor any benefit arising under this deed. In my candid opinion, there is no way that any transfers
Can I explain that a little bit?
Yes, please.
Wait for Kweku to finish. No, conclude your statement.
Yes, I'm saying that this would ensure that nothing can be done without transparency. Nothing can be done in secrecy. Nothing can be done without the consent of the other parties involved. So I will
the majority shareholder can do anything, literally.
No. Wouldn't it violate the agreement?
If you're a majority shareholder, you can do literally
but who is the majority shareholder in this?
That is, we are talking about a situation where the 51% for Ghana is not assured. That's where you brought in this.
Yes, no, but I believe it's assured.
Right.
That's the point I'm making.
Bright says that's not cast in stone because it could change.
By what means? It could change by what means?
Okay.
Why do you anticipate that it will change to our disadvantage?
Right.
Why not anticipate that it could change to our advantage by even increasing the 51%?
No, we want the money, and we want as many as 49% shareholding for others, so that we can get the 500 million we're looking for.
Yes, but so we are proceeding on the basis of speculation. You're anticipating something that really is not cast in stone.
No, he was talking about the mechanics of the processes of listing and floating shares.
But the listing itself is part of the transparency.
Okay, so Bright coming.
Listing itself is part of the transparency.
And we're listing on 2 different boards, in London and in Ghana. Yes, Bright.
And it's part of the transparency element.
Yes, Bright, can we hear you on what you sought to preempt?
The point is not that you need to change the agreement for the shareholding for the promoters to go below 50%. The point is that during listing, if there's oversubscription, the way that the agreements have been structured, it's possible for this underwriter and other advisors to secure additional revenue or additional proceeds in exchange for shares going to institutional investors. So in that respect, there is a possibility that the 51% will not hold. So the argument I'm making is that it's not cast in stone. It's not as if the agreement prevents that possibility from happening. That was the clarity I wanted to make.
So that impression that the government is giving us is wrong.
Yeah, because some people have interpreted that to mean that 51% is the only outcome. And I'm saying that another alternative outcome, which will be completely in concurrence with the documents that we currently have, will be one situation where the promoter decides to go for more. And the way that the system is structured, they wouldn't require additional parliamentary approval or any of those additional controls. And that fact has to be made clear that as a pure commercial transaction, that can happen. You may lose majority control, but that is not in the public debate. That was the point I wanted to make.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah.
So we go to break and come. Yeah. Right. So I need to say that Dr. Steve Manteau, we are reliably informed, is presently making a presentation at a program. He's unable to join us as originally advertised. But like I told you, there are other people who will be joining us in the course of this discussion. Kweku Baako, who is former Deputy Finance Minister and Ranking Member, Finance Committee of Parliament, will also be joining us. So we take a break, return to ask the questions, further questions, including about the potential conflict of interest, or what they say is conflict of interest, with a certain sort of agenda, personal and private. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. My guests that we have been engaging so far: Bright Simmons of MPed degree, Honorary Executive, Imani Africa; Abdul Malik Kweku Baako, Editor-in-Chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, our regular panelist; and Steve Manteau should have been with us. Unfortunately, we understand he's unable to join us. Charles Boahen, who is the Deputy Finance Minister, who has responsibility for this particular deal, also was supposed to be in the studio. We understood subsequently later in the show that he was on his way, but unfortunately we don't have him here. We will be joined by Kweku Baako to help us with the discussions going forward. This show is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group, close as a partner, MTN, everywhere you go, Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Consolidated Bank Ghana, we stand with you. Duraplast, where Duraplast goes, water flows. We lead, we build home for you. Star Assurance, your solid partner, and Rehoboth Properties. Right. As we now proceed going forward, do we have Kweku Baako joining us now? If Kweku is on, we would like to understand their difficulty, as he had indicated to the media after their press conference. They have started with a certain suspicion. You know, initially, the company as incorporated was Agyapa Royalties. And because the law firm Africa Legal Associates is one of 3 law firms, a local partner in the process. There's also Bentiencho, Lecha and Ankoma, and then White and Case in the UK involved. The minority seems to have been a bit in a hurry to link Agyapa Royalties to Agyapa, radio station, and suggested that there was some individual private, interest in it. But I'm sure subsequently they've gotten to understand that there were as many as over 20 companies already registered in Ghana as Agyapa, using that name. And so, as the Finance Ministry explains, they decided that it would be prudent to change the name because they needed the subsidiary here in Ghana, and they needed to register it in a different name for very good reasons. All right, so let's return to Bright Simmons. And Bright, your Imani alert, as you issued, you raise other issues, including the short-term capital raising. You have addressed that, I think, substantially in your earlier presentation. But you say that the timeline for fundraising, there's a problem with it, and you say we are unlikely to meet that timeline. How do you come by that conclusion? And how are we disadvantaged by that timeline? Hello, Bright.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Samson, you've read the agreements, and I'm sure you recognize that there is a deadline. The agreement has a life, an expiry date, and that date is 31st December. If the listing does not occur on or by 31st December, all of this is off the table. I'm sure you know that, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that leaves us about 4 months or something like that to get all of this going. We're arguing that if the government is actually being transparent with us when it says it has not started the process of listing, so it has not yet filed an application to the what used to be called the UK Listing Authority. I think now it's something else, or the Financial Conduct Authority. If they have not yet submitted that application, they have not started the process, it will be almost miraculous to be able to do this in 4 months. That's the argument we're making. It could well be that a lot of this stuff has already been going on, and all of this parliamentary approval, Attorney General stuff is just incidental. And I'll give you a few reasons why I believe that. When you look at the letter from the Attorney General to the Finance Minister, the one that is dated 28 May, I think in the second paragraph, it states that they were first approached with a draft agreement in January of 2019. So this Agyapa transaction, we are told that the structure itself was incorporated in November 2019. That is quite strange, because I don't see how there could have been a draft agreement of any kind involving Agyapa in January 2019 if the entity itself was incorporated in November 2019. So that suggests that maybe there was some other types of agreements and some other types of transactions that had gone on and perhaps been quietly shelved, which is why I disagree with Mr. Baako when he says that all of this stuff has been out there in the open. No, we've had obviously information provided to the public about the government's intent to leverage royalties and other forms of income from minerals through the markets. We've had that, of course. The 2018 amendment of the MIF Act makes that very clear. What is not clear is the nature of the vehicles. Knowing simply that the government intends to form SPVs to make investments tells you nothing about the actual structuring of the deal. And what we are in dispute now is that the deal as it's currently structured is in the best interest of Ghana. I don't see how CSOs could have somehow foreseen that because the law exists, the government will structure an XPV and use it in this manner. Remember, the government could well have structured a Ghana incorporated SPV and said, we will give them mineral royalties, and their job will be to invest in Ghana, to invest in factories, to invest in whatever. The government decided not to do that and to go by this route. You also recognize that a very important part of this whole business was to avoid paying tax on tax. Mineral royalties is tax. And you needed a place where you will avoid paying tax, which is legal. No, you don't.
Tax avoidance is legal. And then the Minerals Income Investment Act, Section 35, says the royalties that are paid should not be subject to tax.
So you don't need an overseas vehicle to do it. You said it yourself.
All right.
The MIF Act is already exists.
All right, thank you. Thankfully, we are joined by Charles Eduwai, who is Deputy Finance Minister, with clear instructions and great expertise in this particular area, who has been leading it. Thank you for joining us, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, Charles.
Thank you, and hello to your listeners.
Great. Okay, so first off, the Imani Alert and the CSOs suggest that what you are getting us into with 75.6% of our mineral royalties, we could get what you are seeking to get, $500 million, by securitizing only 25%. We don't need to put 75.6% to get what you are looking for.
Yes,
voice.
That point, and actually, you know, I don't know when the CSOs got into the business of investment banking and valuation of these kind of companies and how they trade. But I think in the statement they made, they indirectly confirmed what we are trying to do. Because what they suggested was that we can do the same thing, but get more money for doing it by selling to one of the already established royalty companies who are already trading, because that would be a private transaction and they would pay more for the royalties than we would pay if we were to list our own vehicle. I find that very hard to believe, because the valuation of these royalty companies is based on the amount of royalties that flow to the company. So in a listed company like Wheaton or one of the other ones he gave us an example, acquiring our royalty streams in a private transaction, they will never pay a value more than what will be reflected in the value of the company that is listed on the stock exchange, especially if they're paying you cash for the royalty flows. And in fact, what we are trying to do is to skip that intermediary step, because what is happening essentially is that the royalty company stands between you, the entity that is generating these royalties, and the shareholders who are benefiting from the dividends. So they'll buy from you, increase the value of their company to the benefit of the shareholders. We are trying to skip that intermediary step and become a principal rather than be an agent. And what we're doing by own and operate company. So we are going to be the one calling the shots. And if people don't understand that and how this is in direct accordance with our Ghana Beyond Aid mentality, then I don't see how we are going to move ahead as a nation. We are saying here that we want to be principled. We want to own this vehicle and now be in the position that the Wheatons and so forth are in today. And people are saying that is wrong. I don't understand that.
Yeah, so he's suggesting clearly, as you understand, is that we could use less to get what we want, and that you are actually undervaluing Ghana's resources by over 65%. How do you react to that?
Now, let me address that. First, that 1 billion number is not the value of these resources. The value of the resources will be determined by the market. When you do an IPO based on what you call a book building approach. People will offer you a price that they are prepared to pay for the shares. And that will then determine the value. Now, royalty companies trade on a multiple of net asset value, where your net asset value is the present value of your future cash flows or your future royalty flows. Now, in creating Agyapa, which was going to be listed, which is currently a 100% owned entity, we needed to ascribe to it a stated capital or a value, because it needed to have a balance sheet before the listing. That is where that 1 billion comes from. So it's essentially just a paper entry to be able to have a stated capital for this agent. Prior to Agyapa access the equity markets to raise money. Now, as I said, most companies trade at a multiple 4 to 2 times net asset value. Net asset value is calculated as the present value of your future royalty flows. Typically, the discount rate applied is about 5%. If you then say you're going to discount our royalty flows, let's just even say, for example, for ease of calculation, let's assume that our royalty flows is 100 million a year, and you discount that at 5%. If you use a perpetuity discount method, that will give you a value today of $2 billion. That is it. And we know our royalties are higher than even 100. So you are looking at the value, a market value that is significantly higher than that stated stated book value that we use to establish Agyapa. And that is typical. You look at most companies, you see that their book value is at a discount to the market value. And that is how these companies trade when they go on the stock exchange. In fact, that is why you go on the stock exchange, because by listing, you essentially are able to create additional value with regards to, because you have all these shareholders that come in and bid up your price, you have a multiple that is higher than your book value. So most companies you see trade at a multiple to their book value. It's essentially that. This is basic science and how we structure these transactions.
How do you respond to the suggestion by the CSOs, as represented by Bryce Simmons here, that there is a potential of oversubscription leading to the dilution of your share position, and therefore the assurance you have been giving us as a nation that we have 50% plus one, we are majority shareholders, is not cast in stone and may not be the true reflection of what may happen?
Good. First and foremost, we've said that the objective is to raise 500 million. If your company is valued at 2 billion, 500 million is actually only 25% of the value. If your company is valued at even $1 billion, 500 million becomes a 49 to 50%. So if you say that, we're saying that by going to market, we're going to even list at the multiple of 1.5 times the book value of 1 billion. And that means we are looking at the value of about 1.5 billion. 30% of that gives us 450 million, which is far short of the 49% mark, even to now get into the territory where you contemplate even going into a situation where government will lose the controlling share. And we have made a decision that government will continue to own a majority interest in this business, but also recognize that the issue about government retaining a majority interest is of concern to the shareholders when you go for a listing, because the shareholders are also worried. They're like, will government, through its majority shareholding, interfere in the runnings of an independent business whose primarily objective should be to optimize the return to its shareholders. And I need to emphasize that when you have a market-listed company, the primary objective is to maximize the return to the shareholders. Of course, government happens to be one of the shareholders. So through the proper management of the company as a going concern and the right investment, we believe that the return to shareholders will be maximized, including government. So we have to play a very fine balancing act between having government as the majority shareholder and also giving the shareholders enough comfort to be able to believe that this company will operate independent of government and of possible government interference.
You mentioned
the relationship agreement and the investment agreement that define the type of relationship that we'll have.
Charles, you mentioned that when you are going into the market, of course, the investors will not be too happy about you insisting on holding majority shares. First, I need you to give us an assurance that it is in fact, it is cast in stone that government will always hold 50+1 or majority shares in the entity. And why do you mention the fears when you appear to have done something that takes away the fears? The various agreements, including indemnity agreement, the relationship agreement, all these, don't they provide sufficient assurance to any investor, despite not having, majority shareholding? Don't they provide them comfort? So there's no need for any fears.
Yes, I mean, but Samson, exactly the point. These agreements arose out of experience, track record, and spending the last 2 years engaging with all stakeholders, including potential investors, the AG's office, the mining company, DRA, and so forth and so on. And so, really, Bright tried to allude to the fact that there's no way we could do an IPO in such a short period of time. What he doesn't realize is that this has been a work in progress for over 2 years. And we have fine-tuned this and made sure that we've arrived at the perfect balance or the ideal balance between government as a shareholder and a publicly listed company that subjects itself to the scrutiny and the due diligence of being listed publicly on an international stock exchange. So I think it's very important that we understand that. And really and truly, all along the way, the commitment has been that, look, if we government insist on retaining 51% shareholding, what kind of comfort would you need to ensure that you are very confident that even though, despite that we own 51%, we will not have the ability to interfere in the operations of an independent company? People are young, so they don't remember. But when Ashanti Goldfields had a margin call that forced it into bankruptcy, shareholders were deprived of being able to optimize their return because some of the options that were available to Ashanti at the time, including a possible merger or a sale of some assets, were prevented because government had a golden share, which we exercised in blocking some of these possible options that were available to the company. Some of these options may have resulted in the shareholders getting a better return on their share price. But they were bereft of those options because government could assert its position because they had veto powers. So you can't have your cake and eat it. We always have to find that right balance to be able to ensure that we are maximizing value, but as well as appeasing the shareholders and government. And in fact, I think you see during the discussions with the agency and the back and forth, a lot of the issues were about the balance between control and giving up too much of your rights.
That's right.
And I think initially the perception was that we're doing a debt transaction. So looking at it through that lens, because this is quite a novel idea, the AG's office felt that there was a one-sided deal. In fact, that was the way they used it. They were like, this is one-sided. What are you getting in return? But we're like, no, this is not a loan agreement where we are, we're collecting money as a loan and there are all these reps and warranties that we have to sign up for. This is an equity transaction where we are selling shares in an equity vehicle, which is supposed to be a going concern into perpetuity. Totally different type of structure, which needed a new lens to be looked at in terms of what the
so your explanation about this SPV, which is going to be a going concern into perpetuity, and hopefully that because Ghana has, you know, majority shareholding, will have majority shareholding, it will be the biggest beneficiary. Does that explain why the term is not fixed?
Yes, that's exactly why. Because, you know, the assumption is that what you are giving, what you do with these royalties is that you are assigning your royalty flows for a concession area. And in all those cadastral maps he was alluding to was the specific geographic coordinations for every single concession and every single mine within the concession for the various mining companies upon which revenue they pay the royalties to government. And so, insofar as there's a new discovery within that concession area under the same lease, then any royalties that will be generated out of that inure to the benefit of the shareholders, which includes the Republic of Ghana. Additionally, the royalties company, as a going concern, will be in the business of investing in the development of new mines in exchange for royalty flows.
Right.
That's the business of royalty companies.
Okay.
So these ones,
that's clearly understood.
Okay.
I want you to hold on. I'll return to you and ask why you don't tell us up front the exact projects that the money will go into, but you give us rather a broad range of what it will go into, so that we can be further assured that the money will come and it will do A, B, C. And when it is not used for those purposes, then we can take you to tax further. Now hold on. Kaisel Atufor, former Deputy Finance Minister, ranking on finance in Parliament as far as the minority group is concerned, has also been leading the agitation and concerns about what the minority has. Now, Mr. Atufor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Right. So, the law that you passed as parliamentarians in Section 36, Good Corporate Governance, Section 36, Transparency as a fundamental principle, you say that the management of the fund shall be exercised taking into account the overall consideration that minerals income constitutes proceeds from the exploitation of non-renewable natural resources, and the overall objective that minerals income and minerals investment income is to be managed for the benefit of the current and future generations of citizens of the Republic. The management of and duties associated with the fund shall be carried out in accordance with the highest, underlined, internationally accepted standards of transparency and good governance. Then you say that the minister, the board, and the advisory committee in the performance of their functions under this act shall take the necessary measures to entrench transparency, accountability, and free access by the public to information. They are supposed to ensure annual reports of the fund are readily available to the public. In addition to this, this is being listed on Ghana and London. Does that not literally, comprehensively take care of any suspicions that you have? Mr. Forson, we've lost Mr. Forson. I only hope that he heard my question, which I contextualized from reading the act. Yes. Mr. Forson, are you on? Okay. Can you unmute your mic? Good.
Yes,
good.
I think I can hear you
right
now. Thank you very much, Samson. Samson, it is in the same spirit of transparency that we in the minority raise multiple questions. And we felt that these are things that in the interest of accountability and then the job that we do, it is only fair that we raise some reservations on this matter. Let me start. The document was laid in Parliament in an evening. The document indeed was not given to us as members of Parliament until the morning, whilst the meeting was scheduled around 9 o'clock. So I went in there around 8:30, and asked for documentation. I said, look, this isn't a standard agreement for us to use half an hour to peruse and give some form of approval. Certainly, we'll require some hours to be able to look at that. And the Deputy Minister, Charles Boahen, bears me out. So I said in there that until I'm given a minimum of 4 hours to be able to read the document, I cannot. And together with the members of the minority, I will not lead them to be able to do this kind of work. So we all agreed that there was the need for us to be given some hours to look at it. Indeed, we had 4 hours to look at the documentation. Let me say that isn't good enough. 4 hours looking at the kind of work that we needed to do certainly isn't the case. Yes, I heard Mr. Baako when he raised the issue that it has been the case since 1993. It has been the case since 1993 when it is a standard agreement, but this is something that is quite new to us, and you've said it, that this is the first time even an African country is going to do something of this nature. So 4 hours certainly isn't good enough. Now, in that documentation, there were some few serious concerns, not few, serious concerns. And the first concern emanates from the fiscal point of view. And let me start from the fiscal point of view. As a country, as at June 2020, in the media review budget, our domestic revenue is not enough for us to be able to pay interest on loans, pay amortization, the interest we are paying, or in short, service interest and pay compensation. In fact, you need 55.7% more of your domestic revenue to be able to do that. In the media review, it is clear that government has so far, from January to June, been able to attract an amount of 450 million approximately from the budget into the budget statement. Apart from that, they have projected that in the course of the year, we are going to get 1 billion Ghana cedis, slightly more than that, 1 billion Ghana cedis for the purposes of mineral royalties. In spite of all of this revenue coming into the budget, then indeed there is a shortfall, to the extent that we need 55.7 more of the domestic revenue to be able to even service our debt and then obviously pay for compensation. So we ask a question that what happens, the budget statement in question that we are making reference, the media review, it was read less than a month ago and approved in Parliament less than a month ago. We failed to anticipate that something like this is going to come in. So in the very budget statement that we are talking about, there is nowhere that the mineral royalty, the securitization or this very structure was anticipated in the budget statement, both in the cash flows and as long as the revenue coming in and for what we are going to do with the money. So I'm at a loss when I hear the Deputy Minister Charles saying that they are going to use it for a particular project. What project? There's nothing in the budget statement that suggests that you are going to use it for A, B, C, D, or even the flows coming in. So that in itself is a big problem. Then the issue of we needed to do some due diligence on the company itself. Why was it listed in a tax haven? For what reason? Why is it that going forward, the company, who are the directors and for what purposes, how much have we paid so far, due diligence? Certainly we cannot use 4 hours to do that kind of due diligence. And then going forward, we needed to find out the project viability. We needed to find out from the Minister of Finance. Yes, you've talked about an equity structure. Investors, as you know, their names will tell you, they are not for the Christmas. They are in there for a business. So we need to see the prospectus. We need to know how much the investors are going to make. We need to know the terms in the prospectus. To date, we do not have the prospectus. We were told that there is some prospectus in place, but they cannot share with the members of Ghana's parliament. So, what sort of arrangement is this? You are going to list, we do not have the prospectus, how do you expect us to perform our oversight on the deal? Clearly, there's something that this government definitely want to hide. So as we speak, nobody has seen the prospectus, and it's a major concern. Apart from that, we asked the cash flow, and we needed to have the cash flow statement for us to be able to look at, they are talking about 15 years in perpetuity. So if you're saying 15 years, we want to know from year 1 to year 15, the cash flows that you have projected on the specified mineral concessions and its resulting, royalties that the state is going to get. And we needed to know the assumptions underpinning the very cash flows that he's talking about. We were only provided a cash flow for 3 years, 2021, 2022, and 2023. 3 years cash flow without any underpinning assumption. So on that basis, we felt that, look, something is missing. In the name of transparency, it is only fair that Parliament of Ghana will be given that opportunity for us to be able to look at the cash flow statement and then do some understanding, for us to get some form of understanding to ascertain that Ghana as a country is getting a better deal or a bad deal. I've heard Bright Simmons and his analysis, and I perfectly agree with him. There is something really missing here. As at now, Parliament of Ghana do not have the cash flows from year 1 to year 15 for us to be able to run the numbers and to agree that Ghana is going to get a good deal or a bad deal. We do not have the numbers. Apart from that, the terms as is supposed to be in the prospectus, we do not have it.
Great. Okay.
So how do we, in the prospectus, we do not have it. So, and how can we? How can we come out with some form of understanding?
So hold on. With the exception of the prospectus and its terms, which is not available, but which you also suggest that even if it's available, the people's representatives, that is you, the MPs, are being denied it. And the question of the cash flows, which I will get Charles to respond to shortly. What else did you have, concerns did you have that is outstanding today? You said you wanted the opportunity to do due diligence. Let's say we've gone past that stage now. So what due diligence did you desire to do that remains outstanding?
Okay, thank you. There are two outstanding issues that we need to raise.
Yeah, quickly to them.
The legal concerns. And you have indeed perused the issue very well. The issue of the Attorney General's comment and as to whether they have been incorporated in the documentation. We do not see that. We do not see the document before Parliament did not incorporated the Attorney General's concerns. And that in itself is a starting point.
Are you saying that authoritatively, or you are only speculating? The Attorney General's advice was a day before the documents were submitted to you, the 12th, and then you got it on the 13th. The 7 outstanding concerns of the Attorney General, are you saying have not been catered for? Because I can see clearly they have been catered for, including the first requirement.
Samson, I'm making reference to the very ones the Attorney General did not incorporate in the 7 outstanding issues. Those ones are not in the agreement that was laid before Parliament, and that is our major concern.
Which ones?
So I urge you.
Which ones? An example.
The very ones, I do not have the document right before me. So what I'm telling you is that the Attorney General earlier on in his first one listed a number of concerns.
And she says in her last correspondence, she says all her concerns have been incorporated in the amended process.
And I am telling you, as a member of Parliament and ranking member of the Finance Committee, that the document that was given to us, I did not see those ones as incorporated.
You can't point that to us, and that doesn't help.
Yes, and that is why I did not work alone. I work with a colleague, the only colleague. We work with the Honorable Dr. Anyini, also a former Deputy Attorney General, and we did that kind of work. And if you can listen to the submission, it was one of the reasons why the minority decided.
I think you owe the citizens a duty to do the job expected of the opposition, to hold this government to account by listing the concerns raised by our lawyer, the Attorney General, who lives on our tax, that were raised but that have not been taken care of, and yet the Attorney General says have been duly incorporated. Until you have done that, you have failed in your job.
Samson, the minority is scheduled to have a press conference either Monday or a Tuesday.
Okay.
We are going to list the items that we feel that this administration is hiding from the public, and we know it is wrong.
Right.
So expect that.
All right.
And as your producer would tell you that I was in a funeral and I was called in to come and do this kind of work. So I did not come in prepared. You did not tell me.
Thank you.
I would have come in with the documentation.
Thank you very much.
So,
you mentioned that you mentioned that we have a 55.7% more local revenue that we need, especially to service debt. If we are getting
debt and to pay for compensation,
right? If we are getting $500 million upfront, is that concern still valid? The reason you don't want us to monetize the royalties?
Yes, the very reason why I do not want us to take the royalties money going forward or upfront is the fact that our budget is so rigid to the extent that going into 2021, if care is not taken, we'll need 100% of our domestic revenue to be able to service debt and to pay for compensation. This is because the government is borrowing so much. The government, at the same time, is we have a burden of ensuring that we service this debt and amortize this debt.
Normally, what is the percentage that money from royalties or royalties go to service the debt? That this time round, because you suggest it is being monetized, it will not be available for the purpose. What is the percentage?
Ghana cedis is not going to be available in the year 2021 in the form of revenue, if government is to go ahead and do this kind of transaction.
My question was specific. Can you tell us the specific percentage of the amount of royalties that we have over the years been using for the purpose that you say will not be available to us now?
Okay, probably I have to take my time to explain to you so you can appreciate the point that I'm making.
Okay, quickly.
The point I'm making is simple. You have an envelope of revenue as a country. The revenue is made up of tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Mineral royalties is part of non-tax revenue that comes into the bucket. Apart from that, you have some statutory expenditure that you will have to engage. That statutory expenditure include compensation, which is made up of interest payment, which is made up of wages and salaries and allowances. Again, you also have to service your debt and pay for amortization. Yes, it is a statutory expenditure that you have to. And I'm telling you that as at the media review, the budget statement that was sent to media review statement that was presented to Parliament, you needed 55.7% more of that money to be able to, one, pay for the compensation, which include wages and salaries, and then service your debt. This is a serious situation.
And you insist, just a minute.
Or the media
just a second's response from you. You insist that when we are securitizing by this arrangement and expect to get as much as $500 million upfront, we can't do what we should do, what we need. We can't get the 55.7% to do what we need to do.
No, that is where I'm coming, and you appreciate my point better now. So when you enter the year 2021, 49% of the mineral royalties, representing approximately approximately about 500,000 Ghana cedis, will not be available for you going forward in 2021. So the 55.7% that we are seeing, you are going to probably get to approximately 60% plus, right? Taking the money that in future you'll be able to use for the purposes of development or to support the economy, and you are using it for only for the next 6 months. Again, this very amount that we are talking about, the budget did not anticipate it. I heard the Deputy Minister made a mention that, he said they've been working on it in the last 2 years. Yes, the government level, they've been working on it in the last 2 years. But as a member of parliament, I have not had the privilege to work on this in the last 2 years. And I cannot be given 4 hours for me to peruse a document that someone has used 2 years to draft.
Okay,
I can also not be part
Mr.
of a situation that I cannot ascertain.
Right, Mr. Fossey, hold on there. Let me bring in Charles Boahen to respond directly to your concerns. Charles, first, help my lay understanding. You are securitizing at a time where we need 55.7% more local revenue to service debt and make payments. Does it mean that you are hoping that the 500 will take care of this situation as well?
Maybe I should explain what the point he's trying to make a little better. And then we can put it in context. Essentially, I think I might be slightly off, but I think our target revenue, total revenue for the year is about 60 billion, both non-tax and tax revenue for 2020. Now, going by what we earned from royalties last year, which was about 1 billion cedis, that means that out of that 60 billion, 1 billion is will come from royalties. Now, what he's saying is that of that 60 billion, we use 55.something% to service salaries and interest payments. So that is about, whatever he's saying, 30 billion.
No. That is not the point I'm making. That is not the point I'm making. I'm telling you, Charles, that as such today, after the media review, from January 1st to 31st of June, 30th of June, what you've done as a government is that, assuming you had rake in revenue made up of, say, 30 billion Ghana cedis, you have spent the entire 30 billion Ghana cedis on wages, interest payment, and amortization, being debt service, plus 55.7% of it. So because of that, going forward, you may not be able to have inadequate revenue to sustain this going forward. So I'm raising the issue of sustainability. So therefore, my argument is simple. If you are successful in raising this revenue from 2021 to the medium term, what is going to happen to us as a country is that the very revenue, domestic revenue that you will need to be able to run the government, you have decided to securitize that revenue and consume it in the short term. That is my concern.
Okay, so Samson, I think you said what I was saying. So the key points there is that, one, royalties make up less than 0.5% of our total revenues, right? So that's the first point that we should be clear about.
Okay.
Less than 0.5% of our revenues are from royalties. So, and in securitizing that 0.5%, we're actually going to get back 50% of that amount back as dividends. So really and truly, what we are giving up is only 50% of that 0.5% of total revenues that goes to royalties. So, and for all intents and purposes, it's a drop in the bucket when it comes to revenues and where they come from and how that will be our ability to service our obligations going forward.
Okay.
Now, if you are saying that because of this 0.5% drop in revenue, which we use to raise $500 million, right? Then you are saying that because of that, our debt sustainability is into question. Then I find that to be quite far-fetched.
Okay.
If there was an argument here that maybe 20% of our total revenue was being, used in this securitization type transaction, meaning that we're losing 12 billion or 13 billion, then you can say, hey, maybe what are we getting in return for that?
Okay.
But they're actually getting 500 million, which is 3 billion.
All right.
Right?
Charles, now let's, gentlemen, we have to exhaust the rest of the issues. We have to hold on. We have to exhaust the rest of the issues. We have to canvas for our viewers and listeners in the next 30 minutes. I want to plead with you that you stick to the point when we ask the question. Now, Charles, he's asking about prospectus and the terms which are not available. How significant is this for the purposes of the due diligence that parliamentarians need? The cash flow, he says, you have done only 3 years. How does that also disadvantage a proper analysis of the deal?
Thank you. The prospectus really and truly is a market-related document. The prospectus has to be approved because it contains forward-looking statements by the regulators of both the London Stock Exchange and the Ghana Stock Exchange before it is made available to the public. The argument may be made that Parliament is not the public and so they should be privy to it. But we can't afford to run that risk given the proliferation of leaks that we've seen so far, whereby documents might end up being in the public domain when it's not supposed to be, because that would totally derail our ability to go to market. The London regulators will come upon us like a ton of bricks and most likely suspend the transaction. So we have to be very careful with regards to disclosure and what we can disclose. Everything that it will be captured in the prospectus is made available essentially to Parliament, and all they need to be able to make an informed decision about the structure of the transaction. The only thing that may not be captured in the
when can they expect to have it, and should they have it ahead of the process that went on in the House?
No, they couldn't have, because it was not yet. They have not yet been submitted.
I disagree with you.
Show me an equity transaction
I disagree with you,
National Stock Exchange where the Parliament has obtained a copy of the prospectus before it was approved. It's not done.
All right. How about the cash flows issue? Mr. Forsing, I'll come to you. How about the cash flows? Yeah.
Cash flows, as we confirmed, we provided them with 3 years of cash flows.
Right.
Those were available because they are public. They're in the public domain. But over and above that, any other forward-looking projections in excess of 3 years, which may be in the prospectus, will be seen to be forward-looking statements that need to be approved alongside the prospectus before they can be shared.
Finally, before we move on to
historicals, we also provided them with historicals about the historical revenues, which anybody can do their own projections and come up with some valuation. In fact, I think there's some article going on around where 2 astute lawyers have done their own projections.
Right. You disagree with the projections they make?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain? Because reading it, it does appear that it's sound.
Yeah, they seem quite bullish because they assume a growth rate of 4%, and then 2, they use they say that the royalty flows that accrue to the 12 mines amongst that we are including in ours constitutes about 60% of the total mining revenue. I think that is questionable. And then they also apply some average escalation clauses in terms of your royalty rate increasing based on your gold price across board. I think a much more detailed analysis is required on a mine-per-mine basis in accordance with each individual stability agreement. All in all, they come up with projections that are quite aggressive, I think, compared to where we are. And having said that, you see historically, gold prices have tended not to move the way they've moved quite recently. But what happens is that because royalties are based a function of gold price and volume, most mines tend to do about the same volume every year. So the only uptake in the gold price in the royalties is primarily due to either new mines coming into production or a price increase in the gold price. So the underlying projection should be more based on the volatility in gold prices itself, rather than the growth rate that you've seen historically, just more recently in just the last year. Because just the same way gold prices have gone up so high, they can come down quite significantly in future years. In fact, if you look at gold over the last 20, 30 years, you realize that it's quite cyclical. It goes to peaks and it comes to troughs. So when you're modeling out these flows, you have to look at it at an average price over the full term for 15 years rather than a short 3, 4, 5 years.
So like the CSOs in the extractive industry are asking, Kofi Ansah and Fui Chikata will not get their request to the finance ministry to freeze the implementation of the transaction and you know, wait until you consider all other issues raised?
We've done a lot of work on this transaction, and you know, we've also benefited from good timing. Gold prices are now at about almost $2,000 an ounce. They've never been this high before. And the last time they were even close to this was maybe 5-6 years ago, if not longer. So, you know, and there's no guarantee that we'll benefit from these prices at any time in the future. It could change tomorrow. And the whole thing about equity transactions and capital market transactions is about timing. You have to strike whilst the iron is hot. And it's never been hotter as it is now when it comes to gold prices. So if you want to maximize the value of this business for our shareholders and for the citizens of Ghana, there's no time like now. And that is why, despite the fact that we have an election looming, we believe so much in the story and in the confidence that investors have in gold and in Ghana and the gold price where it is today, to be able to still have full confidence to go to the market.
Right.
But it's all about timing.
So before we move on to, I get Bright to comment, and also for Atuforcing to give me a brief, you know, reaction. Can you confirm that the Attorney General's advice have been fully complied with?
Yes, I can confirm that. We're absolutely sure that the 7 points that the Attorney General provided, we have amended the agreement to incorporate all those things before we submitted them to Parliament.
Okay. What do you make of questions about beneficial ownership, and they are seeking disclosure? How does that question come at you?
You know, sometimes I'm quite disappointed with the perception. We need to be able to regain the trust and believe in the fact that we are working for Ghana. You know, when the perception is always immediately that there's something dodgy going on here, it really saddens me. I think the minister made it crystal clear in his press conference, was it on yesterday or Thursday, that this was not, there are no beneficial owners. These entities are 100% owned by Government of Ghana through the Minerals Income Investment Fund. MIF owns Agyapa incorporated in Jersey 100%. And Agyapa
have?
Yes, look, this deal is absolutely one of the best deals, not only Ghana, but any African country has done in the recent past. And in terms of maximizing the value for what we have, I think is absolutely one of the best transactions we could do. Yes, maybe we should have had broader and wider stakeholder engagement with the CSOs. But, you know, what you have to remember that this has nothing to do with gold itself as a resource and the gold in the ground and its development. These royalties are royalties that were already flowing from these gold resources, and they were flowing into the budget through the consolidated fund. So we have not changed anything at all when it comes to the gold mining companies and the production of gold, and even the share that goes towards the Minerals Development Fund, which is to be used to take care of the residents and the people of the mining areas and to take care of environmental degradation and all that. That is still absolutely intact and has not been touched. The only thing we are trying to do here is take these royalty streams that already come to government and restructure them to be able to extract more value from their use through creating this company that would become a Pan-African giant in the royalty space, and which will help us to attract a lot more investment and be able to finance a lot more exploration or development activity within the mining sector, which will in turn generate additional tax revenue and additional jobs and so forth. A lot of people overlook the intangible benefits of the creation of this vehicle and how that will more than make up for the little amount that we are taking out of what comes to the budget today.
Okay.
To give to the company. All right.
I said that would be final before I go to Bright, but something had come up earlier. Of the 1,000, companies or so that are registered in Jersey and from 60 different countries, as are listed on the London Stock Exchange, is there any that is sovereign vehicle like we are doing?
This is, I don't know, to be honest. I have to check. There are quite a range of companies there, and I can go through the list and come back to you by the time Bright has made his comments.
Okay.
But this is a sovereign vehicle insofar as the pre-IPO discussion is had. Once the IPO has been done, it will no longer be a sovereign vehicle. There are a lot of parastatals which have gone on to be listed and listed in different jurisdictions, and I'm sure because of that, they were also incorporated in different jurisdictions. So I won't believe that it's the first time that some kind of privatization has occurred through a public listing where the incorporation of the vehicle to be listed was in a domicilium other than the host country that was privatizing the asset.
Okay, thank you. Bright, what will be your quick comments, having heard his responses to the major issues that you raise?
So something he makes a lot of, my friend Charles makes a lot of comments, and it would be fair if we have some time to go over them. But I'll do my best in the very short time that we have.
Yes.
First, I'm quite surprised that Charles makes the point that he's surprised the CSOs are getting involved in valuation of mineral resource and the like. I mean, he more than anyone will know that the best analysts on whether it's Wall Street or in the city in London are not investment bankers, and they are not traders. A lot of them are academics. Some of the best I've known are theoretical physicists. So I don't know where he gets this impression from that to do an evaluation of this nature, you have to be an investment banker or a trader. A lot of those that I know, I'm not any of those. So, but that is by the by. To go back to the issue of valuation, he gives the impression that this is entirely left to the market and that somehow there's no advice or there's no advisory that they're operating with. That cannot be the fact, right? Because they have to have an offer price. What has been Merrill Lynch's advice to them in respect of what the likely offer price will be? That will be the starting point. They have to do some price equity ratio benchmarking. I have seen some of Merrill Lynch's advice to them, and I know that they've tried to look at peer cohort analysis and the like of it. So the $1 billion did not just come out of thin air. It's not that they needed to declare some book value, and so they did start to put $1 billion of the enterprise value, and then the market would then determine. That $1 billion comes from the best estimate that Merrill Lynch and others working with them believe, using all the information that is available to them of other types of entities and structures that are listed. We know they have to look very closely at Anglo-Pacific Group, because it's the only gold royalties company any remotely close to what they are trying to do that is listed there. So I'm not sure where you get this view that this is entirely left to the market. The other point that he makes that I want to get into is this issue around the belief that he has that the private markets will have somehow valued this less because it's an intermediating vehicle. There are not that many gold royalty companies, streaming companies, that are listed in London. So it's very difficult for me to understand where he's getting analysis around this so-called intermediation that perhaps will have led us down the road of getting less than we are getting through the public listing approach. The truth is, we've looked at transactions that by the like of Cisco and all of these hundreds of companies. And in the private markets, the resources are being valued more than those who tend to list on the exchange and try and get a valuation using private equity ratio type analysis, etc. So the market cap that we've seen, the 5 that Anglo-Pacific, for instance, has, is consistent with a $1 billion valuation.
The transparency you are demanding, will you get that except through public listing? You are asking for private transaction.
No, no, I'm not saying a private listing. I'm saying that in the private markets,
I didn't say private listing. I didn't say private listing. I'm saying the transparency you are seeking, the comprehensive transparency you are seeking. Will you get that if you did a private transaction like in the private market like you are proposing, rather than a public listing as the government is seeking to do?
We will do so long as the government does not attempt, as they are trying to do, and which unfortunately they have succeeded in doing, in removing the Public Financial Management and the State Interest and Governance Authority Act requirements that should apply to MMIF SPVs until they decide to change that. So if they had allowed the current structures to exist and only reduce the presidential discretions that are currently allowed by the law, so that the FMIIF and its investment advisory committee could invest with the same degree of latitude, in fact, somewhat less than what they are trying to get in London. We will have all the information that we require. When the Attorney General said to them that some of the disclosure provisions in the agreement should be altered in order to be compliant with the Right to Information Act, did they comply with that? We don't see any changes made to the agreement to address that. In fact, she asked for an explicit suggestion to the Right to Information Act. That has not been done. So as far as disclosures are concerned, being registered on the London Stock Exchange to ensure, for instance, that you're making disclosures to your share makers and the likes of it, does not stop us using local legislation and like the PFM and the SIGA Act and the like to obtain the same degree of openness and transparency, but without sacrificing control. I also have to re-emphasize the point that we've made over and over again. Specific demands were made by the Attorney General in several pieces of advice prior to the August 12 letter. Those demands were not reflected in the final agreement that was rushed through Parliament. That has been made very clear. We've given
which one particular one can you point to?
Specific examples.
Yes, which one particular one can you point to that was not incorporated? The advice.
The issue about the term limits, the fact that there should be an explicit term limit. The issue about the stabilization
Are you not satisfied with the explanation why you don't need a term limit?
Well, then you have to first acknowledge that they decided to defy the Attorney General. Then you can go into the merits of the argument. We disagree with the merits.
All right,
what
thank
we
you.
have now is a situation where they deny
Thank you, Bright.
the advice given by the Attorney General was not defied, but it was defied.
Thank you, Bright. Bright, if I ask you the question, tell me one good thing about the deal, what will it be?
I can't find a good thing about the deal. What I do acknowledge is that the government is being consistent in trying to look for ways to leverage our mineral resources in a way that brings more revenue. That is the policy level. When it comes to Agyapa itself, as I explained to you at the very beginning, the CSOs have made every effort to find something we can comment to Ghanaians, and we are not. Not surprising them, therefore.
All right, thank you.
Refuse to
thank you, and hold on there. Mr. Kesa Forson, Bright Simmons just spoke about something that happened, which has allowed the present vehicle and in the manner where it is, where there's no accountability sort of to SIGA and PMF acts. You, this year, introduced the amendment in Parliament. As in Parliament, you passed it. Were you against that amendment in Parliament?
Samson, I would urge you to look at the Hansard. And it is clear that the very amendment that you are making reference to, the SPV, the Honorable Muntaka opposed it, introduced an amendment, and it was subsequently defeated by the majority. So I urge you to have a look at the Hansard, and you agree with me on this very point.
Do you remember the amendment he introduced that was defeated?
Yeah, it was defeated. They voted against it.
Do you remember its specifics? Do you remember the amendment he introduced that was defeated?
I cannot remember it offhand. We have to grab a copy of the Hansard.
All right.
But let me make a point. The Honorable Charles Boahen, in his submission, conceded that they only provided a 3-year cash flow to Parliament. He failed to tell us that, yes, indeed, they did not even give us the assumptions underpinning the very 3-year cash flows that were given to Parliament. But you see, there's something really missing here. How did government of Ghana arrive at 500 million Ghana cedis, being 49%? You can only arrive at that if you are to have the cash flows and assume that over a 15-year period, Ghana is going to benefit X amount of money, of which if you are to list 49% and discount it today's value, it will be 500 million. They in government may have some information on this. But why are they depriving Parliament of Ghana from this information? Clearly, this government has something they're hiding. And that is why we are telling them that until we get full disclosure of this information, certainly something is amiss. They're hiding very significant information from Parliament because we do not know the valuation of the company.
Okay, you went very quickly to that.
If you do not know the value of the company, how can you conclude that 49% today's value is 500 million?
Mr. Forsing, when I ask you the first question about the amendment that came to the House this year, you know, the amendments were intended to take away the extensive control that may be exercised by the government under the PMF Act, the PMF regulations, and the SIGA Act over the SPV, and which might limit or interfere with the MIIF, that's the Mineral Investment Income Investment Act, for the SPV to operate as a regular commercial company. So the fact that you lost an argument does not mean at the time you said this was bad, right?
No, Samson, let me make something very clear here. Introduction of a bill does not amount to an agreement. So there are two separate things. Yes, the bill came to Parliament. You can argue on the bill. We would certainly debate on the issue. The bill would like to see the light of the day, and you know the administration has their numbers in Parliament. So what you can only do is that you debate it, raise the concerns, and I've referred you to the Hansard you can check, and then eventually they will put it to vote. What else do you do? Do you throw your hands in the space and say that that's the end of the world? It must go through, but agreement will subsequently come to Parliament.
All right.
I'm raising a very fundamental point. The government is telling us that the vehicles, let's say $1 billion. That billion, he's saying he's listing 49%. And obviously, it's going to, the present value of that 49% is 500 million. How did the government arrive at the valuation? Without telling Parliament of Ghana it's going to cost the valuation. We do not have the valuation.
Yes,
so where
Mr. Forsing,
I want my colleague to tell me what they're hiding.
Okay, Mr. Forsing, before we conclude, I need you to add this issue quickly and in some 1-2 minutes. What is this issue of conflict of interest that you guys, together with the civil society, have been raising about the involvement of the Africa Legal Associates law firm, where Gabi heads, and also the involvement of the son of the senior minister, Yao Safo-Mafo? What exactly is the point of conflict? You say something about that in 2 minutes, and then Bright does the same, and then we get Charles to conclude on the issue.
Thompson, that is a big issue to us in the minority, in the sense that, yes, as at now, we do not even know how much the legal cost is costing the state. The Honorable Charles Boahen informed us at the committee that so far they've spent close to $2 billion US. As to who had what and who had what, we do not know. $2 million. He said $2 million so far, how much they have spent. And he said this at the committee level. We asked for specific breakdown as to how much the person, each company or each consultant is getting. To date, we've not had it. We need to establish whether the amount paid to those companies were at arm's length or not. We also need to establish their relationship with the people that they are actually in office and making decisions. We needed to establish also as to whether this process went into competitive bidding or the processes that it went to the procurement process. We do not have those information.
Okay.
We can only ask a question that what has happened.
All right.
And then the issue of the senior minister's son.
Right.
We want to also find out, was there a system in place that this government advertised for any Ghanaian to be able to have that opportunity, or people, what sort of recruitment process did they subjected the process to? Okay. Until then, you can only raise those questions.
Okay, so hold on, you get the answer to that, if you have not already heard that answer. Bright, what are your comments, or the CSO's comments, about the conflict or potential conflict of interest?
So I have 4 specific questions for Charles, but I'll quickly address this one so I can move on and ask those questions.
I need you to do that in 2 minutes.
Okay. irrespective of the conflict of interest, I don't think we framed it necessarily as a general conflict of interest. We've made the point that when Corn Ferry was engaged to do this headhunting, we have made inquiries. We cannot see any public advertising for the role. Obviously, maybe they have a database. We've asked a lot of people who traditionally will be approached, and none of them were aware of this recruitment going on. So that suggests that somehow the attempt to look for Ghanaian talent to helm this entity was not as extensive as possible. Can I ask my 4 specific questions?
So that's on the conflict of interest. Now hold on for me. Because I'm bringing Charles on, ask your questions in a minute, please.
Okay. First of all, he says that he believed that in the private market, if they have gone directly to royalty streaming companies, they would not have got this particular, they would have got less than what they intend to get on the public listing, or using the public listing route. The question is, did they do any analysis of transactions in the private market? And did that analysis suggest that they will make less money if they went directly to the likes of Franco Nevada, Osiko, and the rest, instead of using this route? I want you to tell me specifically whether that analysis was done and what was the outcome in terms of price, in terms of proceeds per ounce of gold in royalties in that analysis. The second question, he's not addressed the fact that because they are using this public listing route, costs are very high. What is the total cost of listing as a percentage of funds raised? We suspect something in the region of 7 to 10% if you account for broker fees. If that was the case, does he agree that there's an implied interest rate in there, and therefore this is not as sanguine as he makes it look, that it's not a debt transaction, so it's all kosher?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, but you have to hold it there. Charles, can you respond? No, just hold it there, sorry. Charles, can you respond to the questions that have been raised? Sure. How did you come by Africa Legal Associates? Was it at an arm's length? How did you come by Mr. Safumafo's son? And then the questions of money spent and Bryce Simmons issues.
Sure. So first, let me be, okay. No, I'll start from the how do we come by Asafumafo. First and foremost, we got the approvals. We announced this transaction way back in 2017. It was included in the budget for 2018. I think we were, however, a bit naive about how long it would take to put it all together. So we thought we could do it within a year. We then went through a procurement process where we put out an advertisement for transaction advisors. What we realized was that this transaction would have to be done in 2 phases. There's the initial phase where we'll need transaction advisors to advise us on a potential structure for a royalties company, and then also whether we will then raise the money through an IPO, a private sale, or whatever it is that the price is or suggesting. So there were 2 phases to this. So we engaged the services of a investment banking firm through a procurement process where we had a lot of bids. In fact, the bids were very encouraging. Some of them were from full-blown investment banks, which we thought were inappropriate for the first phase because that was more to do with the structuring of the transaction. So in a nutshell, the fees that we are calling or stating that as up to $2 million so far are fees that we paid the transaction advisors, including lawyers, 3 law firms, and White & Case, which had ALA as their local partner, and Bella, which was also the local partner, Buchanan, which was a communications and PR company, and Conferi, which is a global headhunting firm who we engaged to scour the whole globe for a chief executive for Agyapa, a CFO, and the potential board members. And I must say that we were very clear that some of the conditions are that we prefer the Ghanaian for the CEO role. However, we were very clear that we knew that it was unlikely that we'll be able to find a Ghanaian that had experience either in working with royalties companies or being on the buy side where they advised for royalty companies or done any transactions with royalty companies. But we said, look, let's go out there and look. And they went out and they interviewed a lot of people. I'm surprised Bright couldn't find anybody who had received the notification. But maybe because, he wasn't interested in the role, so it didn't come his way. This happened in 2018 as well, so it's quite a while back. So they went through the whole list. They came up with about 30 names, including 6 Ghanaians. And of the 6 Ghanaians, it was only Mr. Osafo-Maafo who had actually worked as on the investment or asset management side as an equity analyst and had actually covered mining companies and energy companies, including gold royalty companies. So he was daily engaging with royalty companies and understands exactly how they trade, how they are valued. So it was on that basis that he was shortlisted and identified as a potential for the role. We then, at the time, he was working with Smith, which he still is. So we approached him and said, look, we want to get this transaction, how to structure this, and also maybe with a future potential role. Do you mind coming on as a consultant for now to help us? And which he agreed to do. By the way, he's an unpaid consultant for gold royalty companies. We won't be where we are today. So I think we a lot of times. It is by sheer coincidence that he happens to be the son of a member of the party. You know, that is just by sheer coincidence. He also happens to be a classmate of mine from secondary school. I was very comfortable with him because I could vouch for his competence, his brilliance, and his expertise. So that we didn't have a problem with at all. Now, with regards to Bryce's question about if we had approached any royalty companies privately, in fact, the whole reason why this transaction came about was because the vice president called me one day and said, hey, he had a company in his office, and they are offering to buy our royalty streams. So we wanted them to come and see me, so I evaluated the offer to see if it made sense. So they came over, we had a long discussion, they sent a written offer for the royalty flows, and I did my analysis. And it turned out that what they were offering us was actually at a discount. So just give you an example. Let's use that same 1 billion number. If we are flows, we valued it at a net asset value of 1 billion using the standard discount rates for the industry of 5%. They were offering us 700 million for these flows. And so I did. After that, I said, look, this is quite, not a good deal for Ghana. And then I also did my checks. I used to be an investment banker. I have about 20 years experience working in London, the United States, and in South Africa. So I know the industry and I know the players. So I called some of my banker friends and I said, look, this is an offer we go. What do you think? They're like, oh, that company, they're looking to acquire these royalties to go and list on the stock exchange so that they can make, a big
all right.
And so that is how I came up. That's how we came up.
All right. I'm sorry, but we've just run out of time. But I am certainly sure that we have dealt with the issues extensively enough for you to make up your mind. Sports Link is up next. So I wanted to get just a comment from Kweku, and he says it's okay, we should go. So my guests have been Abdul Malik Kweku Baako, editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Bright Simmons is with MPERG degree and honorary executive of Imani Africa. Charles Boahen is Deputy Finance Minister. Kaisel Atuforsing is former Deputy Minister of Finance, and he's ranking in Parliament on the matters of finance. Thank you all very much as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Consolidated Bank Ghana. We stand with you. Duraflows, where Duraflows goes for water flows. We lead, we build home for you. Star Assurance, your solid partner. Rehoboth Properties. Have a good afternoon.